It's Mxiety. Hi, I am on tonight with Frank the Pegasus. Everybody.
That's me.
I do have like could make a laugh track happen.
I guess I can make a laugh. No, I only have a aw.
Oh, I can't hear yours.
You
but,
can't
okay.
hear it because it's through the stream deck. But it was an aw for everybody who needs it.
Oh.
Yeah, it's an aw. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody who's here. Thank you so much. Hi, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for everybody who popped in. We are now officially in interview mode. Dun, dun, dun. It just means I can't respond to you immediately when we talk. That's all. That's all. So tonight's episode is about mental health advocacy on Twitch. How to do it kind of in the best way that you possibly can, where our lane is for people who are not professionals, where professionals should be drawing the line, our experiences. So really kind of just drawing from our experiences and talking about what we've learned, what we wish we did better, what we will be doing better in the future, stuff like that. So really want to focus on that. Yes, mental health advocacy is heckin' hard. It's true.
Very hard. It's
Yes.
complicated, and it's just like this whole twisty turny of should I, shouldn't I want to help, but how do I help? So that's what we're here for. We're gonna hopefully help you all help each other better.
Precisely. And I also feel like it's one of those things where it's really easy to mess up without knowing. It's really easy to step in the wrong direction with, like, even though you might have the best intention in your heart, but just like it's a lot of trial and error, and hoping for the best, and then hoping to have an audience that's open-minded and understanding when you make mistakes and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a whole other avenue, is like, are you allowed to make a mistake? Is that even a thing?
Do you think that's worse in mental health streaming, the whole making a mistake?
I think it's worse in anything to do, yes.
Yeah.
Than other things, any other things, yes. But like, I think anytime you're talking about like health, I think like if we were to talk about like there are fitness streamers on Twitch.
Sure.
And if you're giving out any kind of health advice or diet advice or exercise advice, like that is equally as muddy waters, kind of dangerous to talk about.
I see.
When you make a mistake, people tend to take it to heart because you're putting potentially somebody at risk.
Right. Like somebody's life and health and stuff.
Exactly. So I do think, and I think like to a certain extent, we should potentially like put people, like we should check people, definitely.
Right. Oh, I see what you mean. So what do you think? I mean, we can go into that because that's like, where is our jurisdiction as people to check other people? You know, like who gets to say that stuff? Who gets to say? I mean, there's a general understanding, and we can say like, oh, professionals can draw the line and say, hey, if you're an advocate, this is my territory, and please don't, and that's one thing. But I do feel like, on the internet in general, we're living in an age where everybody's the judge, jury, and the executioner.
Yeah. I'm not sure who exactly is the person that gets to decide necessarily. I think you have to decide individually how you feel about what other people are doing on their platform on an individual basis. Like you get to decide, like, is this the kind of way that I want to receive my mental health? And like that also gets into muddy water because there are people that are very vulnerable to receiving help from somebody who might be an influencer or a content creator, or somebody like that they look up to. Like they might just take whatever they say as like at face value and like say like, okay, yeah, that is the best thing for me. It worked for that person. I'm going to do it. And I think we all have to be mindful of that when we have any kind of platform. But I think as far as like, I don't know who should call out when something is maybe not going there. I don't know. I don't think I have the jurisdiction.
I don't think so either. That's why I always ask because people say like, oh, we don't want people doing that. And I'm like, right. Who put that rule down though? Because I always want to talk to that person.
Yeah, I mean, and I do think that there is a reason that licenses exist.
Yes,
right.
Yes,
have that, and so I think that is where that's where like I'm mindful of it. Like if I see somebody doing something that would require a license for me to do it, that either I don't have or I do have or whatever. If it would require some kind of education and licensing, like it's the same thing with law. Like you wouldn't give tax advice and law advice. We're like we're equally careful with those things. Anytime somebody's on Twitter, like there's always questions around tax time about Twitter taxes or like Twitch taxes.
And there's always somebody.
Right. But you notice that most people will say, I'm not a tax professional. This is my experience.
Well,
but like
most responsible people.
Right. So like when that's not happening, like that we have to be mindful of that. Like, oh, you're not a tax professional. You don't do this for a living. This is just some average Joe's advice that maybe he read in a self-help book or so, like be kind of mindful of like the things that do require education. And I'm not saying that education this is such a like this is why this is complex, friends.
It's a super complex topic. It is, but I even think even going back, and I'm sorry, hold on to that thought. But even going back a little bit and saying, it's anything that will have a legal ramification. We live in a country where buzzsaws say don't put in mouth, right? Mm-hmm. And you sit there and you're like, what's the story behind this sign, right? Like,
okay, so literally today I was talking about I have this like I've apparently have allergies. I'm still in denial about it, but apparently I have allergies. And I was talking about having used a neti pot because stay with me. This is relevant.
No, it's fine.
A neti pot because my sinuses are cleared up. And I was telling chat that I just used tap water, and they were like, I didn't know.
Well, it's very dangeroso. Yeah.
It can be very dangerous to just use tap water. You're supposed to use distilled water or boiled water or something that is sterile. I didn't know. And they were like, it's on the box. And I was like, I swear it's not. And we checked the box. I went and I got my box and nowhere on it does it say it. It's the only direction.
I swear on my box it said that. That's the only reason I'm so snotty about it is because that's the box said it. And
I looked all over it. But like, to be fair, I don't have the instructions anymore.
Okay.
Like, everything on the box says just like, look at the instructions. They were
it might also be on the saline packet.
It's not. We looked. I swear. Like, isn't that wild?
It's
not
wild.
Anywhere on the box.
Okay.
It's not anywhere on the box. Apparently, it's probably on this piece of paper that I no longer have.
Sure. Of course.
They were like, well, if you get a brain-eating bacteria, amoeba, then like, like you could sue. And I'm like, well, I don't know that I can because I think they probably put it in the box. But like, that's why. Apparently, why it happened is because somebody got that, and like it was a big deal.
Right.
So we have this warning on the boxes all the time. And like that's exactly it. We live in this culture where like it says, hey, your coffee cup is hot when you go to McDonald's. Like because coffee is not usually hot.
Right.
It is anything that has a legal ramification, which is exactly why like you have to pay attention to licensing. You have to pay attention to like the education behind the thing that you're talking about. And if you're not, you need to be careful about the language that you use. And I think that's the real, like, you can still talk about it. I'm not saying like you shouldn't. And in fact, when it comes to mental health advocacy, I think we really should. So,
well, let's go in there. We're not, and I want to prepare everybody. Frank and I talked about this before. We are not going to sit here and be like, this is how you properly mental health advocate and do not do these things. It's all from personal experience. It's all from like, this is the mistakes we've made. This is what we've done. This is, what we've observed and stuff like that. So that's kind of first disclaimer. But the other thing I want to point out is that like, this is according to us. So like, if you decide for yourself that you heard a mental health advocate and, you absolutely will not listen to anybody that doesn't have a degree, Frank or I are not gonna sit here and argue with you about that. Like that's fair, and that's also like just like your opinion, man. Like it's it's fine. So but let's talk about that. Do you believe that you have to have licensure in order to talk about like to be an advocate?
No, not at all.
No,
because I think an advocate, at least by my definition of an advocate, and I think it's important to kind of talk about what that is. An advocate to me is somebody that's willing to discuss and like bring to light mental health issues. Mm-hmm. And you do not need to provide any kind of advice or any kind of like discussion about a specific event that's happening in anyone's life in order to do that. I think you can say like, hey, I have anxiety and this is something that is part of my daily life, and I'm going to tell you guys when I'm going to tell you all when it's like a really heightened day for me and why that might be. I'm going to tell you my tactics for how I've calmed myself down from that. I'm going to tell you how I live. I'm so sorry. I'm going to tell you how I live my daily life and how I kind of like work around this thing that I have going on in my life. And I think that is advocacy, being vocal about your experience, because right now it's getting better. Discourse about mental health is getting better, but right now we're still kind of in this world where mental health is something that we don't touch, We don't talk about it. It's very hush hush. And especially in certain cultures, just like that's not even a thing. You're sad, you just like feel better, just like get better. And
Just
like you
like
just don't
don't
like
be
you
sad.
right, you don't tell people like you don't you like take that upon yourself. Like you take that burden into yourself. So like we're still kind of in that mindset of like we don't talk about it. And so I think being an advocate is as simple as saying like this is something that affects me, maybe it's something that affects you, this is a space where you can talk about how it affects you, something kind of like that, but without you don't have to put the advice down on it, you never have to. And I think that's something that gets muddy sometimes because you hear somebody going through something rough and then you immediately are like, well, I need to fix this.
Yes.
Like how do I fix this?
Yeah. Well, that's like my own, your own, my own hero complex that has very little to do. I mean, I do understand that, people can go into advocacy thinking that like, well, I'm going to solve the world and like I'm going to, but that if you want to solve and cure, then you shouldn't be going into advocacy. You should be going into the professional side of it, because that is literally, that's doing stuff. Advocacy is raising awareness.
Yes.
And advocating for a specific subject or topic within, and like making people aware of it, right? So advocacy, according to Google, is public support for or recommendation of a particular cause or policy.
Yeah, that seems about right.
Yeah, so advocacy
also very vague, but
it's super vague because it's still like a definition. But it basically just gives you an overview, and it tells you like, hey, you can talk about the stuff and you can know about it, but the line with a professional, I think it's blurred, and it's not.
Yeah, so I mean, I talk about this on stream. Like, I do have a licensure in counseling.
Oh, you do? Like, you have like a legit licensure in I didn't know that. Yeah. I don't think I knew that. Okay.
Very specifically, though, and I say this in a very general way, I have a licensure in counseling.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a licensed therapist.
Mm-hmm.
My licensure is in addictions counseling very specifically.
Ah.
So there are some things that cross over from addiction to other mental health things. Like, I know a lot about depression and anxiety because, one, I went to school for it, even if I didn't get licensed to treat that.
Right.
I went to school for it, so I learned a lot about it. But also, most of my patients have anxiety or depression or both, or a myriad of other things, bipolar, like lots of different mental health.
Yes, addiction is usually kind of not a side effect, but is usually an outcome of other mental illnesses.
A lot of times it is used to treat. It's like a self-treatment. Yeah.
Right.
A lot of times, not always. And that's a whole other thing.
Yes.
But what I'm very specific about is that I cannot, first of all, I can't do anything. All I can do is recognize. I can't even diagnose. I can recognize symptoms of a mental health disorder.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I can do. I can administer the proper tests to say, yeah, you kind of fall in the line where I'm going to give you a referral.
Mm-hmm.
That's what my licensure dictates. That's all I can do.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not I know for sure because I see you and I know, it doesn't matter, because I cannot actually diagnose, and I certainly cannot treat any mental health disorders. Absolutely not.
Okay.
Unless I guess,
and that's in your licensure. Like that is excluded basically from the license that you have, that it's something that is not.
It would be malpractice for me to do it. Well, no insurance would cover my treatment for it. That's
Oh, there you go.
That's the other piece of it, is like, even if somebody was coming to me for anxiety and if they didn't have addiction, okay, this is a multifaceted thing. So
sure.
assuming that I was somehow comfortable treating somebody with anxiety, let's just put it simply.
Okay.
Assuming that, which I would never, but
right.
assuming that they were comfortable coming to me and they didn't have any kind of addiction, there's no way unless they were just paying me out of pocket, there's no way for that. And then if anything goes wrong, they can absolutely sue me for malpractice, because I'm not covered under any of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my licensure covers me for anything that might go wrong with addiction, so long as I'm covering my butt and doing all of the other bureaucracy stuff behind the scenes.
Sure.
But there's nothing in my licensure that allows me to do any of that treatment. Mm-hmm. So, and like, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing it, because although I have some training and I have some crossover, sure, it's enough to allow me to really truly recognize the signs. Like I would say, it's kind of like a nurse. I don't know if you've ever talked to any nurses that like have been doing it for a really long time, and they start to recognize a lot of the symptoms of the things that they work with really regularly,
Sure.
and they start to kind of like diagnose it and maybe offer treatments. But a doctor has to be really careful of that kind of nurse, because that nurse thinks that they know,
Right.
but they didn't go through the same
Extra
medical.
8 years of school. Right.
No, they didn't. They have the experience, and that gives them the danger of the experience is that it gives them the thought that they do have the same knowledge as the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And in practice, they might the majority of the time, but there's always going to be that one time that if the doctor doesn't check up on what the nurse is telling them, that they're going to misdiagnose or mistreat, and it's going to be a big disaster. And this is like, I bring it back to medical treatment because I think people understand that so much more, because it's
Mm-hmm.
like mental health is still such a like weird nebulous thing, because we just haven't been talking about it long enough,
Right.
honestly.
Right.
So it's like we don't have like therapist nurses, if that makes sense.
No, it,
um
like we have like licensed nurses that do psychiatric therapy,
yes.
but like I know exactly. If we want to
Psychiatric.
make it simple and take the medical part out of it, like for
Yeah.
example, I was talking to a contractor and I was like, "Well, we really need to redo our bathroom," and he's like, "Well, then we're gonna have to get a plumber in," and I'm like, "Well, I mean, you know how to fix stuff. You can't fix plumbing."
You can just do that.
Right, you can't, and they looked at me like I have four faces because that no, that's
He's
not
like, well, I mean, yeah, in my own home, because I know how to do it, but like I'm not gonna do it for you, because if
right.
it goes wrong, you're gonna sue me. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm gonna install your toilet backwards, and then I'm gonna be like, you're gonna sue my butt, and then what am I gonna do? Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Um, but no, that's exactly it. So so you have this license? Is it like forever? You do it once and it's forever?
Kind of. I have to pay to renew it,
Oh,
and I have to
okay,
do continuing education. So it's a lot like any other licensure.
okay.
I So the way it worked for me is that you have I graduated with psychology as my degree,
Mhm.
which was enough to get me um, a certain number of boxes checked on the licensure column in
Mm. Mhm.
so that I was able to get what's called an in training license, which you need anyway in the
Mhm.
state of Wisconsin, because you need to practice underneath somebody and do a
Mhm.
certain number of counseling hours underneath a supervisor, and have a certain number of supervisor hours, and basically like get your toes wet.
Mhm.
And while I was in training, I did the rest of the like very specific classes that I didn't have for that addictions counseling license. So I am a substance abuse counselor in the state of Wisconsin. I'm recognized as a substance abuse counselor in the state of Wisconsin. And it's a state to state thing. There's lots of reciprocity with Wisconsin specifically, but
Sure.
like my license also doesn't go outside of the state of Wisconsin. Not right now. I've never applied for it to. So anybody that comes to me that is not in the state of Wisconsin, I cannot treat.
Mhm.
So like
Yeah.
there's lots of like little silly legal things. But yeah, basically once I have it, they can't take it away from me as long as I'm paying my dues and doing my education and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
and not like malpracticing something.
Yeah, I mean I'm not in practice right now anyway,
Right.
so
What made you, can I ask you? I know it's a little bit personal, but can I ask you what made you not do that anymore?
honestly, I we don't get paid enough.
Fair.
That's like the biggest thing is like I didn't get paid enough to pull the hours that I was pulling. The company that I was working for was the best job I'd ever had,
Sure.
and it was still I was still working part-time as a nanny at the time that I
Wow.
left, and I was pulling like 60-hour weeks plus 10-hour 15 hours nannying a week. And I wasn't getting paid for all of it
Right.
because they didn't allow overtime, but I
Of
needed
course
to
not.
put in the hours to get all of the paperwork done. Basically, I had a caseload that was like 15 patients too high and not enough hours in the day. And I wasn't
Right.
salaried, so there was no incentive for me to stay. And it got to the point where they were like, you cannot stay in the building, or like, we're not going to pay you any overtime. And then I stopped staying, but then they were
Right.
like, you're not getting all of your paperwork done. And I was like, you get one or the other. Like,
Yeah.
that's how this works. Like you get one or the other, and that I can't do both. And
Right.
I just got to a stress breaking point. I love the demographic. I miss the actual counseling bit of it, but because I work with people all the time, I still get to do. I don't counsel, but I do get to have like I get to form the connections that satisfy me in the same way that counseling kind of did.
Right.
I
Right.
still
Right. Right.
feel
I
like
totally get that.
I still feel like I'm providing not a service because I'm not a counselor, and I
Right.
certainly if you've ever been to my stream, you know
No,
that I
but
know.
like you're providing like personal interaction. I know what you're describing because it's similar to why I'm like, okay, now I want to go to school and get my master's and become a therapist, because I'm like, for the longest time, my question was always like, oh, I don't want to do that because I don't know that I can talk to people about their problems day in and day out.
Yeah,
And now, right. And now I'm doing this, and like, I'm not a therapist. I don't give people advice. I don't pretend to. But I am interacting with people enough on a day-to-day basis with enough people that have just issues. I might not be counseling them on them, but I'm supporting, just being that support.
Right. You're there. You're in it enough with them that you have to learn to compartmentalize in order to deal with that.
Yes.
It sounds like your biggest holdup for becoming a counselor was like, am I going to be able to handle that?
Yes.
Right.
And oh my gosh, yes, you're nailing all of it, right? And now I'm like, oh, I clearly am handling that okay, so I could probably like do that now.
Yeah, I'm excited for that.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to figure out how the heck to make that happen, because I mean, you know, that's money.
Yes. Yeah. I would recommend trying to find so I don't know what licensing is like where you live, but in the state of Wisconsin, what you could do is go back for a master's in social work and become a licensed clinical social worker and do pretty much everything you would want to do as a therapist.
So they have in New Jersey and in New York, I don't know about other states, but New Jersey and New York both let you get a master's degree in mental health counseling. So that's what the degree is. So it is like social work, but it's more specific. So you can end up working like in like a school as like a counselor, or you can like take on clients and be like work in a therapeutic environment actually. Yeah. So
I mean, that's like, it sounds like basically how they license our social workers. Like a lot of school counselors are social workers, and I worked with social workers when I was working in addictions. So some of them go into addictions, and like there's all kinds of stuff. But I would recommend maybe a part-time program and just go for it.
Yeah, so either it's a part-time, but I have to figure out, because I looked at it and it's at least $35K with the cheapest school around me.
Yeah.
So I understand like you don't pay it all up front, you know, it's slow and credit by credit and stuff like that, but that money still has to come out of somewhere. And if I'm streaming and working full-time and trying to write a book and also trying to like, all of those things can't happen at the same time.
Time for GoFundMe, Marie. GoFundMe going back to school.
I've been my theory right now is that I would do like a Kickstarter for my book, and so the book would help me raise funds then.
I like that idea. Yeah.
Right? So I mean, it's slower a little bit than like ideally, like I'm not going back to school this fall kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like I don't know. I feel like that's better. I don't know. But it is fucked up. Yep. Jesse's right. It is messed up. It is. I have to figure out, like, the fact that you can only pretty much do it by fundraising is kind of messed up. Like, I still am paying off my undergrad loans.
Same.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's really difficult to justify being like, oh, I still owe, I think, $40K. So yeah, I'll just throw another 30 on there. No big deal.
Well, the nice thing is that if you work for a nonprofit, I think this is national, this isn't a Wisconsin thing, but if you work for a nonprofit for 10 years, you're never late on a loan payment, all of your loans get like expunged from your record.
Really? I wonder if that's like a thing, because also that's a lot of working for a nonprofit for like.
Yes, and it's not great pay, but if you're
and maybe overworked and maybe
yeah, and you can't be late on a payment. Like they're very stickler about it, but you just have to. I think you just have to hold a position at a nonprofit. There are like loopholes. I think you don't have to be anything more than part-time at a nonprofit.
Huh.
I have a friend who was the company that I worked for when I quit was not a nonprofit. It was a corporate company, and it was the only for-profit company that I ever worked for in addictions, because there aren't a lot of them. But I had a friend who was still working for the local crisis center because of that, because she was like, I will take the couple of shifts a month that it like, if that is what allows me to expunge my loans in 10 years, like I'll keep doing it for 10 more years.
Right. Well, I still need to also somehow pay off these first 40 that nobody's forgiving me for no reason, because it was a history degree.
Oh.
So it's, I mean, like anything else, it's just.
I don't know. I don't know.
But it is, no, I am on an income-based repayment right now, but you have to be full-time. Yeah. But it's
yeah, or public service. Yeah, Whitney.
yeah, it's not impossible. It's just a lot of stuff has to shift into place and a lot of priorities have to change on my end. Like I have to commit to this and be like, okay, I'm going to make less money for like the next 5 years, and there goes my plan of having a kid and buying a house, and a lot of so a lot of things have to fall into place. So we'll see. There's announcements coming for sure. It's just a matter of me deciding on all this. And anyway, this show is not about me and Mxiety's educational future. The show, the episode.
I'm excited about your educational future, regardless.
Oh, you're so sweet. You're so sweet. Thank you. It is exciting. I mean, it is exciting when I like stop and think about it and consider. It is pretty freaking cool. Oh my gosh, I don't know if she snaps this here, but thank you so much for the host, honey. I had to think her out loud. Okay, so you kind of touched upon this, but so you do talk about mental health on your stream, and how and in what way?
So I have done in the past something that was like a little more mental health focused on a day. Like we would do what I called self-care Sundays, where people could fill out an anonymous form and basically just like vent into that anonymous form, and I would read it if it said to read it. If not, I would not. And basically we would just like bring it up as a topic because we didn't know who it was about. It was easy for us to just like talk about it in a very general sense of like what we might do in that situation if we were in that situation.
Oh my god, I love that. I would steal that if it wasn't already.
Go for it.
No.
I don't do it anymore, so somebody
Why'd you stop doing it? Why'd you stop doing it?
I stopped doing it because it was a lot to do every week for me. It kind of like detracted from a lot of the other stuff that I wanted to be doing on stream. I would ever do it like just every once in a while, but I worry that it's just like a little off my beaten path for like what we do every other day.
Sure. Okay, fair.
This is out of, because I don't just like do just chatting streams. So
right.
I think it would just be a little bit weird. It was more when I was doing crafting things, and then we would also do other like things with my hands, things that either I needed to do that would help with my mental health, or there was like one day that we did fidget toys where I made like just a bunch of handmade fidget toys and showed people how to do that, because I thought that was just like a nice way to be like, hey, if you need a fidget toy, you can make them yourself. They're really easy.
We started out as a crafting stream here too. Way back when.
I think there's something to be said for people. I mean, I don't know why you craft, but I craft because it helps my mental health.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
So that was a lot of why I started doing it in the first place. So they went hand in hand for me, and they always did. And stream hasn't really strayed from like the way I talk about mental health. Like I very much am open to, if you're having a bad day, I want to hear that you're having a bad day, because I have bad days. And I want to tell people when I have bad days. This is my support network as much as it is your support network. And I think that there is too much stigma surrounding mental health. So I want there to always be this open communication, open like discussion about what's going on. And then, you know, like if somebody says something that, because again, I have licensing to recognize certain things. And I recommend any advocate that is going to be on Twitch at least go through a crisis class,
right? Because those aren't expensive, and there are free ones.
It's super easy to do, just so you can at least like say like, I can recognize the signs of somebody in crisis.
Yes, and I know where to send them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because that's really like for me the only time that I'm ever like, oh, maybe you need to now, right now, go.
Right.
Go.
Not be here.
Not
Why
here.
are you here?
Well, because I can't give them the individual attention that they need in those moments. And that's the way I frame it, because it's true. I'm not just like, get out of my chat because you're ruining everybody's mood.
Right.
I'm just like, you need more attention than I can give you right now.
Right.
And here's where you can go about getting it.
Right. Yeah, that's what we do as well. Unless somebody's like clearly trolling, then yeah. Well,
and it's fun to try and like recognize those, but like I think you start to learn when somebody's in crisis versus when somebody's trolling. And I try to always look at it like, especially if I don't know them, maybe they're not trolling, maybe that really I'm reaching out. I always try to at least treat it like that.
Yes,
Usually it's like me saying like, hey, this is the link, this isn't an appropriate avenue. Like, here's your link of resources. This is not an appropriate avenue for you to be reaching out for help. And usually those are the people that are coming into chat and saying like, oh my God, my dog just died. I'm going to,
Uh-huh.
I'm upset and I'm going to go off myself. Like, it's
Right.
like that kind of dramatics. And like, I don't know, maybe it is true.
Right.
And for whatever reason, I had a friendly face and they were like, pink hair playing The Sims, I'm in. I'm going to tell her about this.
Yeah. But
Safe to talk to. Like, I don't know, but
no,
it's
you
also
don't know. But I also feel like you can recognize there's like a specific type of troll that comes in that is like, that comes in and is like stupid about it. It's like, haha, mental health is dumb. And you're like, that's a weird thing to say. And then they're like, oh my God, my dog just died and I feel terrible. And you're like,
right,
oh,
exactly.
so you're just like hiding behind it. Like, it's still trolling, but you like recognize that it's just because like they're not emotionally ready to have that discussion with you just yet. Yeah.
Absolutely. But yeah, I think there's always kind of like a framing that you can do where you say like, this is what I do. Like, this is, and I usually will say something like when I'm talking about anxiety, for example, I say my brand of anxiety is this, like, manifests in this way, because I'm well aware that mine is one of many. This is what I do. And I think it's relatable, or at least I hear it's relatable, but like, that's why I talk about it, because I think it's important to say like, you're not alone if you're feeling this way. In fact, somebody and somebody who functions highly is also feeling this way on regular, like almost every day, friends.
Right.
It's cool.
Right. Like, it's cool. It's totally fine. Yeah, that's the discussion. I feel like it's interesting reminders to give to people once in a while where they're like, oh my God, and tell us how to handle this. And I'm like, okay, so now I'm in a depressive downswing and shit sucks and I don't want to see anybody or talk to anybody. Just so you know, that's who you're taking opinions and advice from, right? Yeah.
From somebody who has still not figured all of their shit out.
Right. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend I have, right?
Exactly. Like, I am, this is another like way that I advocate. And I think that like, this is an important thing to say, like, this is a way that you can advocate, is just to be vocal about your experiences. But like, when I have to take a day off because I can't get out of bed, I tell them that that's why I'm doing it. Like, I tell them like, I'm crying in bed today. Today is a day where I'm just gonna cry in bed. I'm sorry. It sucks. I wish I weren't. I'm mad at myself for it. I'm feeling all of these things that you have felt before, or maybe some of you have felt before, or at least you can understand because maybe somebody has felt that before. So like, I that's another way that's like very easy for you to advocate for mental health, is just to say like, hey friends, you're not alone.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going through this alone. Your experiences are normal.
Right.
Your experiences are valid.
Right.
Like, that is how I advocate more than almost anything else, honestly, is just talking about my experiences. And even when somebody comes in and says like, I'm going through this, I usually say like, that's really tough. Have you gone through this before?
Right.
Like, have you been through it before? That's one of those like counseling techniques that I do know. Like, have you gone through this before? What did you do then? Like, what experience did you use to get through that? And beyond that, I'm like, man, if this time is different, maybe contact somebody, or we have DMs that are open if you feel like just talking about it is going to help. We have DMs that are open. We have a channel in Discord for it. But like, I usually, when it gets to be really heavy, because I'm not just a mental health stream, when it gets to be really heavy, there is a certain amount of like, we try to navigate it to a more personal setting. It's not like get out of stream. I don't want to frame it that way, because it's not that. It's more that like, I don't want to be sucked into giving all of my personal attention to just one person, because I'm there for a lot of different people. So if I feel like the one person needs more attention, that's usually when I say like, even if it's not like a crisis moment, I usually say like, is there somebody that you can talk to about this privately? Or is there somebody like, do you feel comfortable talking in Discord about this so that I can give it personal attention later, that kind of stuff. Because that's another way that you can kind of advocate. But I think that there is a very real importance in, honestly, just like a crisis class is so, it's so
I can't
accessible.
But I advise that too. Anytime anybody asks me, they're like, well, how do I become a mental health advocate? I'm like, have you tried mental health first aid?
Yeah.
I know it's not cheap. It's still like $70, but my local YMCA subsidizes it, so it's only $40 for me, and it was one Saturday, and you can renew it online, and it was like one of the best things.
Yeah, it's
if nothing else,
exactly. That's exactly. It's quick. You just have a one day.
Yeah.
One day
and if nothing, all it did is it gave me the peace of mind to know that I'm not going to tell somebody to like go play with a turtle when they're not feeling well. Like, I wasn't gonna do that anyway, but I am now, like, I was now put in a place where I knew my answers were correct. It actually helped me feel better. Like, there was a friend I had that I had told them, like, you need to, I can't help you. I really think it's time for you to go to therapy. And they got upset with me, and they told me I didn't know what I was talking about. And they didn't talk to me for, I think, 4 years total. We had no communication. Yeah, because I told them to go to therapy. And because they were suicidal. They were there was a point in which they were standing on a rooftop and joking about jumping. And I was like, I'm not prepared for, and I had told them, yeah, so I had told them, I was like, I'm not prepared for this, so you need to go talk to a professional. And they're like, you're just pushing me away. I can't believe you do that. And that class, which was like, I think 4 years after the event, was the first time where I like stepped back and was like, I did do the right thing. And I can actually forgive myself for it now, because I lost contact with that person. It was very upsetting and very, like, it felt like I really royally messed up, but it was still a choice that they made. And that was freeing for me to hear that like, just because I didn't save somebody or I didn't push them to go into therapy doesn't mean that I did the wrong thing. And like, that's mental health first aid taught me all of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the way I look at it, when stuff like that is going down, and it happens in Twitch chat too, like you have somebody that is beyond your scope, right?
Which is most people. And even if you're a professional, somebody comes into your Twitch chat and said, I want to end my life.
That's my point, is like, even if I was in my counseling job and somebody said that to me, I don't care if you're a licensed therapist, I don't care if you're anyone else, you know what you do? You call the ambulance to get them hospitalized, so they can get 24-hour surveillance.
Right, so that they don't hurt themselves.
Mm-hmm. Right, that's what you do. You get them in a facility immediately.
Yeah.
So that people can be watching over them. That's not me. I'm not doing, although I have been in a facility that had 24-hour surveillance, and we did have suicidal people. That did exist. Like, that was part of my life, and that was me at one point, literally. But like, if somebody came into my office and sat down and said those words to me, like, we would take action. Like, we would take action to do those things.
I was one of those people that action was taken with, and like, yes. And I came into that office, and I accepted the help, because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do if you do not, if you don't do something. So I like give my life into your hands, basically.
Yeah, like, tell me what I need to do right now.
Yeah, and she was like, well, you're going to the hospital. And I was like, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you were willing and able to accept the help.
The hospital experience was terrible, not gonna lie. It was really bad. It was really bad. It was not great. But it was more to the hospital than anything. Like, it's not because like the protocols were messed up. It was because the people I encountered were just awful.
That's unfortunate. Sometimes I think people get jaded in their jobs, but that's a whole other discussion.
Right. And that's why, like, I even say that, like, because I don't want to pretend like I had this amazing experience and everybody should try it if you're suicidal. But I also, like, so I want to make you...
Do you want to be hospitalized?
Do you want to go to be hospitalized? Let's go.
You should definitely seek help if you're suicidal. Like, that is very clear.
Yes. That is, but I want to make it clear that, like, it's also not a joke, right? Like, I did that because I was like, there's no other, and looking back at it, I'm still glad I had that experience, because I was able to understand, like, what is going to happen if I ever get myself to this point again. And that was enough to scare me, to keep to keep me taking care of myself, so that I didn't have to go back into that experience.
I mean, even if you have a terrible experience, it saved your life, right?
It did. It absolutely did. Because I remember my therapist had asked me, she's like, do you have any sharp objects at home? And I was like, I don't know, but I can bet you I would find them if I wanted to right now. And she's like, oh.
Yeah.
I was in college. Yeah.
Those are like big ol' warning signs. Like, you were not discreet at all. You were basically like, no, I'm going to go do this. Like, you are my last resort.
Yeah.
you let me walk out of this office.
And I remember I scared her, and she's a professional. I remember that I scared the bejesus out of her. Yeah.
It scares people. I've had to deal with it a couple of times. Thankfully not too often, but it's always scary because you have this worry because you have to keep them there. And then I'm sure you remember, you probably were in that office with her for quite a while.
Yeah.
Because she has to make the proper phone calls and make sure that there are people that were reached out to that know what's going on. And she knows exactly what your follow-up is. And she knows exactly how you're being transported from where you currently are to where you're going. And you have no escape in between. So she has a lot of things that she has to take care of, which means you have to sit there. And she's, you know, your adrenaline kicks in like big time. Big time when you're in that state of like, okay, what now? Like, where is this person going? Who are they going with?
Oh, hold on.
Like, that's a whole other thing on like the hospitalization side of it. Like, you know, do they have a plan in place? Do they have follow-up care? That all of that stuff. And it's definitely a huge adrenaline thing. But I just come back to like, that is why it is so important when you are not a licensed professional on Twitch, that if you are going to be a mental health advocate, you're very, very careful about what you're doing, because if any of those steps aren't documented as well as a professional, that's your license. That's your livelihood that is on the line. Like, if you don't document that and something were to happen, that's it for you. You're to blame. Whether or not you actually were to blame, you are to blame legally. And that comes down on you. Like, that's not different on Twitch. Like, we come back to like, if you can take legal action, we live in a world where that's going to happen. And like, it sucks that it's going to happen, but that's just, I don't know. We live in that world. We kind of have to be mindful of it, you know?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. So I wanted to ask you, because you kind of referred to this earlier, and you said like you feel like you have a support group in your audience and your audience feels supported by you. I ask this often to myself, and usually I ask it to streamer friends like privately, but and I'm curious, it's not like a personal question, it's just personal to me. But so the question is there a line between when you're on Twitch and you're talking about your issues and, you know, you're supporting, and when are you just like whining? Because not a lot of people, like, if I stop and just think about it, right? I turn on a TV show, and on that TV show, the TV host is just like, yeah, you guys, and then my cat had to go to the vet, and it was like terrible, and then after that I got into an accident, and like my car, and like watching that, I would be like, well, this is not, I don't want to tune in for that. Like, I'm sorry your life sucks, but I like, I don't, that's not what that's not why I turned on the TV, and B, like, I don't need to know this about you. Like, that's not what I thought this goods exchange was, right? So but it feels like on Twitch, there's that audience, there's that conversation that you can have that's very personal with people. Like, it literally feels like somebody's in your living room, and you could be like, yeah, and then my cat got, no, wait, your cat went to, that's so sad. And then what happened? You know? So where is that line of, like, we're entertainers, and we have, like, a support group, versus when we're just, like, straight up just, like, whining and nobody wants to see that?
Oh, that's rough, because there are definitely days that I go live that I say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have.
Ooh.
Because there are days that I go live and I do feel like that. I feel exactly like that. Like, I'm just telling people why I'm anxious, and I'm outwardly displaying that, and I'm really emotional when it happens, and I never feel anything but love back.
Yes. Same.
Because the way I look at it is, there are a couple of things in place here. One, the people who don't want to hear it are not there.
Sorry, I'm not waving a knife around. This is a pen. Just wanted to make
that. Okay. Like, the people who are like, they turned on my television show to be entertained, they're not there. They're not there for me to do that. They have not tuned in for me to be an emotional wreck.
Right.
If they came in and they saw it, they're like, maybe I'll come back another day. I know she's better on other days. Like, I'm not hanging out for this. The people that are still there, there's the other part of this is that, for me, a huge part of what we do on stream is talk about mental health and talk about tough topics. I won't say it's just mental health, but a lot of times we talk about
real talk
social issues, and like, you know, like we dive into those, and I don't shy away from it. Like I will talk to you about whatever you want to talk about within reason and within my scope of understanding. Like there's a reason we don't talk about politics, and it's because I'm not a particularly political person.
Right.
Don't I like know about social issues and I know about what's going on in the world, but I don't dive into like the very specifics of what every person does, especially like
Yes.
right as they're doing it.
Right.
If I did and I felt more knowledgeable about it, we probably would talk about politics more.
Right. Right.
But that's
Right.
not something that like I'm particularly interested in. So we
Right.
just keep it out of chat because I'm like, I can't navigate this. I can't mediate this conversation, so I'm not gonna. But the things that I know about and the things that I'm interested in, like we talk about all of it. So I think when I am having a rough time and I do decide to go live and I'm just like, man, I've definitely had days where I cut it short and I say like, I shouldn't have gone live and I'm sorry that I did. Thank you for hearing me out. I'm going to go do this on
Not
my
with
own
you
now.
guys. Yeah.
Not in front of you guys because you don't need it.
Right.
Like you've done your part. Thank you for listening to me. Like sometimes they make me feel better. So there's
But
that.
what is that line? Because people will, like, I have literally seen other people. I feel like I'm guilty of this, so I'm not like, there's no shade I'm throwing at anybody. But I have seen people come on and be like, you guys are my therapist. You guys are my, like, I'm so, yeah, see that was the face I made. Like, you know, I'm so glad that we have each other as a support system. And like, it doesn't exactly work both ways, right? Because if your audience was just complaining to you, I feel like you would cut that and you'd be like, oh, well, that's not what today's episode is about. And
right, exactly. Like so when the way I look at it is like I allow other people to come to me and vent.
yeah.
Right? Like that's a thing that I'm totally cool with.
In fact, that's something we encourage. Like I say, like, do not keep it in, ask for somebody to help you. Mm-hmm.
And like I also get to hear the cool things that are going on in people's lives. I got to hear that a friend of mine was going back to school. I got to hear that somebody got a promotion or somebody just got a new job. Like I get to hear lots of really cool stuff just along with like I'm back in the hospital and I'm really frustrated that my body is letting me down again, or I'm having a really bad mental health day, or I just found out that so and so died, or you know, I hear that stuff too. And I think that is a good supportive friend is what that is. You know, that is a group of friends sharing their lives together. And sometimes I go live when I'm not at my best and I don't realize that I'm not going to be able to handle it. You know, like we all have those days that are borderline. Like I definitely have days that I'm like, not today, fam. I can't do it. I don't even bother going live. And like they get to know why, but they don't get to see the details of it. And then I have other days where I'm like right on the line of it, where I'm like, I think I can pull it together today and I'm gonna be okay. And then what usually happens.
Always usually.
It's almost always this because I'm bad at lying. And so somebody will come in and just have a very sincere, how are you? Like, you know, like there's like the, hey, how's it going? And that's whatever. But like,
wait, but how are you? Yeah.
But sometimes people will just like very sincerely stop and ask me, how are you? And that's when I'm like, not good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. But and I go off, and then I start getting stressed that I'm like, oh shit, now this is your problem. I'm so sorry. And actually, until you ask, I kind of thought I was okay.
I was doing okay. I had it together. I was like by a pit, like a just a hair, but I was doing it. I was making it happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, and I always feel bad when that happens, and I think that I strive not to make that happen. I strive not to like to do that because I think the minute that I start treating stream as that platform is the minute that I stop seeking actual help. For one, and that's not a good thing because I love you guys, but you're not therapists either. So there's that. But also, I think that's the point where stream starts to be like, well, is she ever happy? You know, like, can I be entertained here? And that's a huge part of what we do.
Well, that is another thing that I worried about. Like, because how does it, I mean, the way my anxiety, the way my depression works, it's usually not like a 3 hours of anxiety and then we're good. I just got to wait it out, right? Like right now I'm going through a downswing and I know, first of all, I only recognized it like early last week. Second of all, as I'm going through the downswing, I'm recognizing that like, oh, shit, my content's starting to suck. And this is not a, like, I'm not saying this so that somebody comes in and says like, no, I know what I'm capable of, and I know when I'm not performing to that level, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I feel that downswing. I feel it coming, and I still want to like kind of know. It's my point is it's not a singular occurrence. It's not a you can wait it out 3 hours. It's not. So there's probably like a good week, maybe 2, where my depression is running the show. And it's not, and like I just have to and I imagine with you it's even more difficult because you stream full-time, like, right? It's I don't know, X amount of hours, right? You stream more, you stream more than I do. Okay.
Yeah. I'm not technically full-time, but I stream full-time hours, sure.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. So so you stream that many hours, like, again, it's the same thing. I've thought about this in the context of like my regular 9 to 5 right now. I have shitty days where I still have to go into work. I'm not feeling my best. I know I'm not going to answer as many emails. I'm not going to get as much work done, but I had to go into work. Like you just have to go into work. So I know I'm not giving you, like, if my boss asked me that day, like, I'm not performing my today's not a day where you would be like, you deserve a raise. You know what I mean? And every day can't be like that. Right. But as a streamer, you're still ultimately, and this is my opinion, you're entertainer first.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, why are you could be doing a lot of things in front of an audience of people, but why streaming then? If you're not there to entertain, support, you know.
Yeah. So I would guess I would put entertainment as like a broader spectrum of like you are there to, like, because I do think that there's value in like educational platform, right?
Yes.
Like using this platform for education.
Yes.
And that might be also entertaining.
Right.
But I guess entertainment for me is like all laughs, all jokes. Like it's like comedy, but it doesn't have to.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be.
Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be all, it can be dramatic. Like we like dramatic shows, or it can be like learning about things, but either way, I do see your point.
Maybe
of like,
I'm trying to say like I'm here to lead. I'm not.
For sure.
Yeah. So whatever that means, I am there to be. I'm running something, right?
Right. Yeah.
So you can't run something and also be in the back lines, right? Like I can't. Like my boss, there are some days where he's like, I'm not the best boss ever, but I'm not less of a boss today, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's like I'm here to. I took this on as the head of a show, so maybe it's not maybe not entertainment, but just like leading. I am a community leader. I'm a community manager. All of those things. Like you're at the head of this group.
So I guess it's hard because when it is ongoing, because it is often ongoing, where you're like, I'm having a hard time this week. Usually that's what I tell people.
Yes.
Okay. So that like it's not something that I'm focused on, but like I'll say things like, it's been rough for me. And sometimes we might dive into it if like it seems like everybody really seems to want to know, and I'm also comfortable sharing in that moment, like where my brain is at, then maybe I might go into it. But more often than not, it's just asking forgiveness for being subpar, and saying like, this means that we might do things a little haphazardly. Like I might go live a little bit later today, or I might not be live as long, or, I said I was going to play this game, but I can't do it today. So we're going to do something else because that just feels good. And it's like asking the permission for that kind of leeway, I guess. And it's really as simple for me as saying like, usually it's like when I post my schedule, I'll say like, hey, this is all kind of subject to change because I've been kind of going through some stuff, and like I just need the little bit of like playroom here on this. I don't know. Does that all make sense?
Did we just like ramble, guys? Tell me in the audience, what do you guys think?
Did any of that make sense?
Did any of that make sense? Because I feel like we both feel better having finished those sentences, but then I'm like, but did we say anything? But did we truly say something? Oh my gosh.
That's a mood forever.
Mood forever. I mean, because then I'm like, then I feel guilty. Then I'm like, what kind of, okay, we get it. You have depression. You've been depressed for 2 weeks. Like, great. Like, Can we?
Yeah, but that's you, right? That's you feeling guilty.
Yeah, 100%.
That's not
Nobody in my audience, in my community.
people putting guilt on you.
Yeah, no, that's not. Nobody in my community would ever say that. Everybody's incredibly supportive. I also have not cultivated the kind of community where people will be like, you're not on for a day. I'm unsubbing. I hate you. I'm unfollowing. I don't have that either, as far as I know. So it's all. Yeah, you're right. It is all my guilt.
Yeah. So I don't think, unfortunately, I don't think that you're doing anything. Like I feel like what you're saying is it's all on you. It's not on them. You know, it's like that's a you thing. And it sucks because I've been there too, where you're just like, man, I should just quit because I'm not doing it well, so I might as well not do it at all.
Oh no, that's literally the opposite of what I preach. Like, do half-ass anything over not doing it at all.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the reality, and that's why I still am here. But I definitely have those days where you're just like not doing it well, and you're like, man, why am I even bothering? Nobody cares. I suck. I'm done. It's over. Everything's dying.
But hold on, that's just like, that's okay, that's mental health advocacy. If you're like, I'm giving up on everything and everything just because I don't feel good, that is like the definition. That's mental health advocacy in a nutshell, I feel like, to me.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, that's just, that's me being honest with you when I'm like, I'm quitting. And then my audience is like, what? Don't do that. You don't mean that. I'm like, no, I don't mean it, but I had to say it out loud so that you'd all be like, what? So that I could, because you hear that voice in the back of your head that's like, what? Yeah. What are you doing? But you don't believe it until other people are like, no, that made no sense.
No, a lot of times you need that outward validation. And I think that's a lot of what mental health advocacy is like just saying like, yeah, man, what you're going through sucks. you know?
Right. No, you're totally, because I provide that to other people.
Yeah, you're not being unreasonable. What you're going through sucks right now. Yeah. And like, I would feel the same way in your position, you know? So like, I don't know, like it's such a delicate thing, but I think it's a lot of it is in the language that we decide to use. I think that's the biggest thing for me is like the language that you carefully use to talk to people and to receive information, and like that play there has to be just so, because otherwise you might be pushing, I don't know, you might be like pushing advice where you're not capable.
Okay. Yeah, that's the line. Okay. Yeah. Captions don't work with guests. I'm really, really sorry for the inconvenience. I cannot have captions on with the guests because they would only be my captions. So it would not look great. It would not work.
Yeah, it'd be really confusing.
Yeah, if somebody can figure out a way for me to have my guest and myself on captions at the same time, I'd be very, very glad for that.
After stream.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's like a thing? I'm just missing out on it?
I think so, because when I was listening to a YouTube video earlier, it captioned it.
But YouTube is different because YouTube can do after captions.
No, I mean like my captioner was captioning it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry, guys. I'm sorry. I am sorry.
I don't know if you have the capability, but I do know it's possible.
It is possible. It's within the realm. Okay. All right. So if I could talk about mental health without a degree, but you strongly recommend that I take some kind of a course or something about it. What is it? What do you think? Yeah. So, when we already kind of talked about this, like, where do you think the line is, and where it's very clear that you know what the line is for you.
Yeah. And I think that's all like I can personally know. I would say that I think the line really does come with training, you know? Like, I think if you, and some experience, so like there's something to be said for having experience going through it yourself, and to say things like, this is how I deal with that. Maybe that would work for you. But then you have to be very, very careful. Again, this comes back to like the language that we're using. You have to be very, very careful of like how you've decided to say that. Like, did you say that? Like, you should do this. You know, it's very different than I have done this and it worked for me. You could try that. You know,
Right.
like it's maybe not so subtle, but it is very different to tell somebody to do something, especially on a platform. And whether or not you like it, hello, if you're a streamer and people are watching you, congratulations, you have a platform and you
Yeah.
have an audience of
Yeah.
people that take your word and believe it, no
Right.
matter what it is.
Right.
And they will use it and twist it, and you have to be pretty careful with that. So I think that's for me, like that's where I would say like training and experience can definitely drive what you like, how much you're able to advocate on a platform like this. But I do think regardless of that, because yeah, regardless of that, you just have to be careful to not tell someone to do something and instead like to offer them like, this is what I have done, does anybody else have solutions that they might have tried that maybe would work for this person? And then, you know, you check in with that person, does any of that sound like something maybe you would want to do, you know, like that. Those are all things, but like that's stuff that I learned in training too. Like that's the other piece of that, is like it's hard for me to say like you should do these things and this is how you should talk, because that's just how I learned to counsel, and that's part
Right.
of school. Like that's part of
Right.
things I went to school for, um is to like how to communicate that kind of thing. Because even if somebody is coming to you as a licensed person to hear about these things, they don't necessarily want you to just like tell them what to do. So even if you're like, this is how you would fix that, like
Yeah.
it's just like you don't like, you anybody who's been in therapy knows that that's not what the therapist does. You don't go there, you don't talk about your problems, and then
Right.
immediately they're like, go home and do this thing. Like they
Mm-hmm.
might give you a homework or a worksheet, or like say like, will you log your feelings?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like they might give you like activities to do, but they're not
Mm-hmm.
going to say like, this is the solution that's going to work for you in
Right.
every situation, go do this thing. Like that's
Right.
just not.
Anybody who's ever actually said that to you have been like, you know what your problem is? We love those people. Who doesn't
Yeah,
love talking to that
right.
person?
Well, yeah,
You
exactly.
know
But
what
I
your
think,
problem is? Here, if you just did this, it would be over already. First of
yep,
all, you wouldn't say that to yourself, right? Like, I mean,
right.
I have said that to myself. Like, oh, if you were just more blank, then you wouldn't
Oh,
be
yeah.
blank. But it's nonsense. It's not.
Yeah,
It's just
exactly.
nonsense.
It doesn't actually work like that. The other piece of that is that like if somebody did tell you what to do flat out, I don't care how right the solution is for you, you would hear that and immediately be like, no,
Yeah.
gonna
Don't tell me what to
don't
do.
tell me what to do. Exactly. So like there is a certain amount of like you have to be able to like navigate that, and that's something that comes with training and experience. And unfortunately most people who are going to be advocates on mental health don't have either of those things. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, like obviously we talked about the limitations of my licensing. Like there are things that like the realm of how to talk to somebody is beyond the scope of addictions. Like that goes beyond that, because the kind of counseling that I did, like the types of counseling that I did, go beyond the scope of addictions.
Right.
So like although my licensing doesn't do that, like the way, you know, motivational interviewing is a type of talking to somebody in any situation, in any kind of therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy is something that you use in lots of different therapeutic situations, and those are the things that I'm trained in. So like yeah, I know things that go beyond that, but like that that isn't something that like the layperson is going to have.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I just say like talk about your experiences, talk about their specific experiences. Do not tell them what to do. Do not tell them what they should be doing. If you need to, go link places that do have
Right.
professional advice.
Right.
Like have those links ready. If you really are serious about it, like have that kind of information ready so that you can refer to those things.
Cough.
And
We have a whole website where I have all these references and resources. Cough, cough, cough. Yeah.
yes, yeah. Like that's the kind of thing that's the thing that I think is really important. It's a hard and complicated thing to navigate, because each individual is exactly that. They're just like they're their own unique person, and they're going to have their own experiences, and they're going to bring something new to your table, and they're probably going to catch you off guard more than once. And it's just kind of like, I think learning where your boundaries are is a big one. Like what is beyond your scope of being comfortable talking about it too. so you can make sure to like keep that kind of stuff out of chat. And yeah.
Right. Right. But that's a really important note, is like you kind of threw that aside, but that is a really important note, is knowing what you are comfortable talking about and then not letting other people push you beyond that. You know,
Yes.
if somebody comes in and they're like, "Oh, I want to talk about, how I'm grieving," and you're like, "I can't talk about death. That actually freaks me out. That triggers me."
Talking about death. I
Right.
never know what to say. I've never been good at it.
Yeah.
So
I don't
that's
really
definitely one for
the
me.
only thing I have to say to that is I don't know one person that's told me I'm good at talking about death, first of all, or one person that's been like, I'm so good at grieving. Because people come in often, they're like, I'm so weird when I grieve over death. I'm like, is there a way to do it? Is there like a step-by-step process to grieve death properly? Because I never got that rule book, and maybe that's the problem. But like, yeah, that's one of those things that just like it's hard to
I think
do.
you just never know what to say, because it feels like no matter what you're gonna say, it's like, is that it's all cliche, because
Right.
it's true. Like the cliches are true, but it doesn't work. It doesn't help. Like it'll feel better with time, which is true. It probably will. Probably, at least if
But
you're
like that's the equivalent of saying they're there.
well, yeah, but that's just it. Is like, yeah, no, none of it works. None of
Right.
it works. But like, what are you gonna do? You can't change that. So all you could do is say like, man, yo, that is terrible.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. But that's the same thing as saying like, "Hey, I'm sorry you're going through a depressive swing." That's not very different.
Yeah,
That's like commiserating and validating that person's
yeah,
feeling
that's
about
true.
this thing and just letting them know that, hey, what you're feeling is okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I get the line.
Yeah, yeah. There's just I think it is about knowing where your lines are and knowing what like where any expertise you have lies, and may not like what is outside of that scope, but then also like, what just makes you uncomfortable.
Right.
What like, and it's okay. It's okay if some things are okay for you to talk about and other things aren't okay for you to talk about.
Right.
Especially if you are like if you're dealing with mental health issues yourself and you have triggers, and like there are certain topics where you're like, man, we can't, because that's going to send me spiraling.
Right, for sure.
Like
Like
that's
pickles.
yeah. Yeah, just like pickles. How dare you?
You are
How
so vulnerable and in my stream, and
dare
I just
you?
attack you. That was a personal attack. I'm sorry. That was way below the belt. Not
I was
cool.
told I'd be safe here.
I was like, "Oh yes, Frank, come on to the show." No, don't be anxious. I'll create a safe environment for you. Becca!
Oh my gosh.
Oh no. I'm sorry. I am.
Yes, damn him if you've got him, friends.
Oh no. Oh no. 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 All right. So let's. The last kind of question I have for you, and everybody prepare your questions by typing in the exclamation. Hold on. Is it? No, that's question. That's the wrong command. I'm so sorry. It's this. Yes. If you use exclamation, then the letter Q, and then your question, Frank and I will do our best to respond to you as long as they're relevant, and that's that. But this is our last question for the discussion. What do you think about gatekeeping, and do you feel like it's prominent in mental health? And so let's back up. Gatekeeping is a negative connotation to creating a barrier for people, like basically saying, if you cross this line, if you don't do this way, then you're not doing it right, and therefore you shouldn't do it at all, right? That's people who say like, oh, you're not a real nerd if, or you haven't lived if you're not you're not a mental health advocate if, and then adding a negative connotation to it. So do you believe that mental health gatekeeping exists, especially right now when we're kind of, like you said, we're in this world where we're transitioning from not talking about mental health at all to starting to talk about it, to I've kind of, like, I guess I'll answer the question kind of head on, which is I've found that there are not a lot, but there are professionals that will literally butt heads with advocates and be like, not your place. You shouldn't be talking at all. I've seen that.
I think that's kind of it's a hard thing, because I don't know that I would call it gatekeeping exactly. I think if you're saying like, don't talk about mental health, then yeah, that's kind of a gatekeep, isn't it? And I think that that's some BS. I don't know that I've experienced it personally.
It
So
was
I'm sorry
very
that you have.
backhanded when I experienced it. It was very
Yeah.
like it was very like you don't have it was because I have a background in history and research. That was what I graduated with. It's
Yeah.
research focused. So that's where, and then I have 5 years of experience working in scientific and medical publishing.
Right.
Actually, I did the math recently and it's more like 6, but who's counting? Um
You.
but me clearly. But it was brought up to like, well, you're not, your bachelor's degree isn't even in psychology, so how could you educate people about it? And I was like, I don't agree with you there, because if somebody was sitting and talking about American history, I wouldn't be like, oh, no, you can't possibly have read any books or learned anything about this.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, that's frustrating. Like I said, I haven't experienced it. That sucks that you've experienced that because you clearly are so passionate about this thing
I'm trying.
and you're doing it. You're doing it good. You're like
Oh.
truly like
Oh,
taking the
now
time.
I'm just asking for compliments. Thank you.
I believe in what you do. I really do.
Aw.
I can't say I've experienced it, but like obviously it exists. And I think it's a tricky line because there is a certain amount of like, well, how far is too far to talk about mental health
Yes.
without having a license? So I understand
Right.
where licensed professionals are coming from, saying like,
Right.
don't cross your boundary. You don't have the education. Like it's like
Mm-hmm.
people making fun of WebMD and saying like, well, don't use WebMD to diagnose yourself. You don't that doesn't have the education.
Right.
It's just learning about the symptoms. And
Right.
there's a certain amount of like practical things, but like you're to be an advocate is not to give therapy. So yes,
Right.
I think that there's gatekeeping on therapy,
Right.
as there should be.
But there should be, right.
That gatekeeping is like years of education and experience. So like
Right.
I'm cool with that gate. That
Right.
gate
That gate
that
needs to remain closed. Yeah, we're
it's
good.
good to be there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like if you're just talking about like your own experiences and just, like hashtag talking about it, then I'm all good with that. And I think that we need to be more vocal about it because to gatekeep it is to kind of like continue to keep it under wraps,
Right.
which is dangerous for everyone
Well,
because
that's exactly what makes me nervous is when people say like, "Oh, you talking about your mental health experience," or even the line that I've usually seen is that like even talking about this is how I would handle it is still not okay because people get ideas and might like then try what you did and then you could potentially be in trouble. Even if you did say like, "Oh, this is just my experience and this is how I handled it in my experience," somebody can go and try that. Like the example that was brought to me was like, you say when you're depressed, I go for a run, which is something that I do,
yeah.
right? So then I say that to somebody who, for example, has a bad knee. And they're like, oh, well, Mxiety said, I love your face, by the way. Mxiety said running would help me with my depression. So I'm going to go for a run. Oh, shit, I forgot about my bad knee. Well, now it's Mxiety's fault. So it was a lot of layers of stuff that, like, of things that had to, like, somebody had to not be aware and really ultimately be blaming me for something that I still don't believe would be my fault. But I do understand, like, I almost understood the concern, but at the same time, I was like, yes, but if I am ultimately responsible for what I said, but I cannot be responsible for the actions you take based on what I mean,
that's no different than anybody. That's not different than a therapist doing the same thing, like so like let's take the platform away from it for a second.
Okay, sure.
And you're just telling a friend, I have depression, I go for a run. Like, is that also not okay all of a sudden? Like, is it because it's the platform and multiple people can hear you?
I think it's the platform that does it. If I'm talking one-on-one with somebody, I can give them all the disclaimers and say, like, but I know you have a bum knee, so, like, don't do that. Maybe that's not best for you. Maybe you can do something else that I did, or...
And I think, like, disclaimers are important when we do talk about mental health, even on a platform like
I
this.
agree with that. I think that's really the key.
Giving them like this worked for me, it might not work for you, maybe it's not even possible for you.
But I imagine I've had streams where I like maybe didn't say that because I'm so used to saying it that it's easy to assume that like, oh, everybody in my audience has already heard, like they know.
I get that, and I think mistakes happen, like, oh darn, you made a mistake and you maybe didn't give like 10 disclaimers before you said something, and like there's a certain amount of like common sense that needs to be said. You were never in this statement.
Right, in that statement.
And I don't think you ever would. Have you ever like said like, this is what I do for my depression and I think it works for everybody, or and I think everybody should try it. Like that is not, because that's not okay. Like that's
well,
like,
that doesn't also make sense, right? I mean,
no.
but it's still, and then I still feel like it's on that person listening. If you're sitting there and just waiting for somebody to be like, everybody should try X because that's what works, like some Tony Robbins crap, like, or I don't know, or like it's the same person.
Yeah.
Right. It's the same person that's like buying the ab lounger or whatever. That's like, oh, this works for everybody. And it's totally cannot be bogus at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard because I think like we should be aware of how our language is affecting everybody, even if they but mistakes happen. Like we should be aware that like you can't say things like, you know, this works for everybody, and like you just can't do that. But like again, you weren't, and so it's not on you. Just because like I think of like me in a group therapy session, right? And I'm saying like I'm just teaching about some like that's how our group therapy sessions always went at the clinic, was we would basically teach about like the cycle of addiction, for example, and like maybe somebody would have a specific situation that they would bring up about it, and I would say, yeah, that's a great example. A lot of people experience that. Like even that language, somebody else might internalize that and say like, okay, so I'm supposed to do this when this happens, but that didn't work for me, or like you know, but like that's not on me as a therapist even in that situation. You know, like if they had a question about it, if they said like, hey, what about me, I need a variation on that, like
right,
yeah, maybe I would provide that. But I think you're on the money. Like that's not really on you. It's the only thing you can really do is like try to mediate everything that's happening there, and do your best to give as many disclaimers as you can when you can. But if you forget, like you're human, and ultimately you're just like sharing your experience. You're not actually like telling anyone to do anything.
well, the difference is that I also educate. That's where the gatekeeping comes in, is that people like I don't I mean, you technically, to be a teacher, you also could need, but I'm not like, I'm providing information, I'm not necessarily teaching.
Yeah, you're just relaying information in
right.
a, you know, that's not different than a freaking video essay.
Right. Right.
Which
That's
we
how
all
I look at it
all the time. You're just a live video essay.
right. A live it. That was the whole point. If you asked me when I started the stream what was I going to do, it was like I didn't want to do this on YouTube because I wanted to talk to people while I talked about mental health. That's it. That's the whole thing. Oh my gosh.
But I don't think it's different. I don't think it's like I don't think it's different than doing that same research. Like, you know, we watch video essays on all kinds of things, and this isn't the you relaying information. Like anybody can be an educator in that way.
Right.
So
right.
you're not trying to teach a college course. Nobody's getting a certification because of your education.
No. So. I mean that's a big difference too. But
and they do put a ton of trust in you that you have done the education yourself.
Well, that's the difference, is that you do have to rely on me to believe that I do my research before I regurgitate things over to you. And
that's on you to fact check. If you're like, Marie told me this and it is true, so I'm going to go tell everyone I know without.
Well, I would never, right? But I would never, if somebody said that in any sentence, I would never say that like, Frank said pickles are gross, so that must be true. Like I wouldn't say, like I wouldn't say, like no, it is true, right? But it's like factual. But like I can test that on my own, or I can ask then like, oh, but then I talked to Lucid Fox and he said pickles aren't gross. Like
yeah, or you cross-verify with other educational sources.
Right. But that's why I also provide my references. That's another thing to point out, that like when an episode is about research focus, I provide references.
Yeah.
And I do. Sorry.
I just said it was an important thing that you do that.
So, and I do wanted to get into like sponsorships and stuff, but thank you, Dr. Mick, for coming in with your people. I appreciate you. Hi, everybody. Hi, this is Frank.
Hi.
She is on, and we're talking about mental health advocacy and how to do it right. And we did also start by talking, Dr. Mick, about how I talked to you. Oh my gosh, my camera. Sorry, guys. Vaguely about this, like this topic in a different manner, because he talked about more like how do we do it safely. Basically, that was the conversation. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. Hi, Super Gaijin. Thank you so much for subscribing. Everybody who subscribed. If I missed you and didn't say thank you, thank you. I will be doing the giveaway for stickers and magnets after the interview is done, so please stick around. Okay, so the final question is, nobody, you're not even supposed to be here. He just said, did you hear him?
No, I just heard mumbles.
Oh, the mumble was stick around, because I'm giving away stickers. Okay,
I see it too.
Yeah. Did I mention Lucid Fox all the time? Lucid Fox is my stream father, Smuckers. So yes, absolutely, I mentioned Lucid Fox. So, but then that's the same thing. My God, was I, because of the comments I've gotten before, my God, was I stressed over being sponsored. And that made me very, and we talked about different, like you and I have talked before about sponsors and like, hey, I don't feel good about this sponsorship. Hey, these guys seem like a good sponsorship. So like, do you think it's a different responsibility that we have as mental health streamers? And you kind of answered this in the beginning too, but as mental health streamers versus like just any streamer, you know, chugging away and advertising G Fuel, like, is there a different weight on us as mental health advocates when we get sponsored?
I think it depends on what you're being sponsored by. I think the types of things that do want to sponsor mental health advocates tend to lend themselves to mental health treatment in some ways, or at least like the ones that we've talked about for sure have definitely done that. And I think that there is a lot of, let's just put it this way, you do what you're going to do. Like you take whatever sponsorship.
You do you, boo.
Yeah, you take whatever sponsorships you feel good about. But if a mental health company comes to me, or somebody that's schlepping something that is used to treat mental health is coming to me, I'm going to do my research before I accept that, and I'm going to ask them questions. I know we've talked about a certain platform that shall not be named that reached out to me way back about being sponsored by them, and I came to them with some very basic questions.
Very basic, like, hey, what do you guys do about the privacy? And
yeah, I was asking them, how are your counselors licensed? How does insurance work? So that I can, honestly, it was so that I could relay the information
right.
and also make an informed decision about whether or not I wanted that.
Right.
But like, I wasn't trying to like out them or anything. I was just like, how are your counselors licensed? Like, how does this work logistically?
Right.
What do you do about payments and insurance? Because like, you know, it's like a national company, but like a lot of things are state to state, as we were talking about. And so I was just like, I was asking really basic questions and they just did not respond. And so I was like, you know, I could reach out again and say, yeah, I'll take it. Or I could take that as a sign that maybe this one's not for me, because if they can't answer my basic questions, I don't feel super great about that. But then, like, you know, there are definitely companies that are doing their research and they're making it work and they are, you know, figuring all of those nuances out. And it's on you. It's on you. It's on anybody who takes any sponsorship to do something that they feel good about. And I think the danger is that people don't necessarily have like any kind of counseling background might not know to ask those kinds of questions, which is what happened in that sponsorship case
scenario.
We're taking that sponsorship thinking, yeah, this is a great platform, I'm really excited about this, like I love making people feel better, I also suffer from mental health issues, this is a great thing, I fully support this. They didn't know to, like, they didn't even think of those things because they don't know, which is, again, you know, it comes back to that, like, this is why it's important when you're being a mental health advocate to talk about your experiences and remember that you're not a professional and you don't have the training and you don't have that experience, because it will get you into sticky situations that you just didn't know existed. Like, you just didn't know. And so, yeah, I think, I mean, honestly, if any company ever comes to you and wants to sponsor you, like, do your research.
You should do research. Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're a mental health advocate or not. You should do the thing, like, make sure that that company has integrity and that they match what you stand for, and, you know, ask them questions about them too, because yeah, it might be really exciting to get paid to do a thing, and especially if you're like, this is really in line with the thing that I already do, it's even more exciting because you're like, man, I don't have to work hard at all to like schlep
Right.
this product because I
Right.
already use it. It's great.
Right.
Like you also have to make sure that if you're gonna get paid by them, that it's something that you really stand by because now your name is indefinitely attached to that company.
Right. Well, and that's just important, period. But the point that you made before still stands, that we're talking about something that's affecting people's bodies and stuff. And that's
Yeah.
why, like, uh, it's okay if I kind of shoot myself in the foot here, but, like, if G Fuel ever came towards me and, like, offered me a sponsorship, I would say no just because I don't agree with, like, with that kind of like beverage ingestion.
Yeah.
Right, but
You're
that's
not
my research and that's
really,
my decision. Right.
yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, like it wouldn't be a good fit for you anyway, right?
Right.
Because like you wouldn't, you're not, you don't want to drink that kind of caffeine, and you
Right.
don't want to put like, energy drinks into your body. So it wouldn't be a good fit for you anyway. So it's not like that's just it. Is like it sucks to say no to somebody that's willing to pay you,
Yeah, of
right?
course.
To like make your content that you want that, and that like that's the dream for us is to
Right.
say like I'm gonna go live and I'm gonna do my thing anyway, and then I'm also getting paid for it, like a solid paycheck rather
Right.
than like maybe getting paid for it.
Right.
I do this for free. Maybe I will also get paid today.
Right.
Maybe not. Maybe I do this for free today, you
Right.
know?
Right. Right.
So like it's always nice to like have sponsorships, but I think it always is something that like you have to be mindful of. You're putting your name on that thing.
Right.
You know, you're putting your name on that. That's not, if you don't stand by it, then it's it's a huge thing because not only do you not stand by it, or and like maybe the company goes under or whatever, and like you find something out about the company that was shady all along, or you say like I'm going to put my name on anything, and then putting your name on anything doesn't really matter
Yeah,
anymore.
well, eventually you just become a bad person to sponsor because you're
Yeah.
like you
Yeah,
endorse
you'll take
everything.
any. Yeah,
Right.
you'll take any sponsorship.
Right. And
Who
then
knew?
yeah, and then people will look at that and be like, "Well, they'll just take any so I don't." It'll be like having a conversation about anything else. Like, why should I take their word for it if they're just
Right.
excited about
Yeah.
everything? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, so we have a few questions and then we can let you go, my love. Uh
I'm
yes.
excited.
Yes. Okay. 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 So let's see. Let's see. How do you know Ooh, okay. Nathan the Canadian asks, "How do you know where to draw the line between you being a professional and answering some question, someone else not being a professional that shouldn't say something?"
Sorry.
Hmm. Let me repeat that because I'm a
Okay.
little confuzzled by it. Okay.
Okay.
How do you know where to draw the line between being a professional and answering a question and someone else not being a professional that shouldn't say something? So, like, are you
So
trying.
like
Sorry,
so
go ahead.
like where's my line as a professional when I would answer a question versus like something that is like in my realm versus out of my realm, or how do I know that?
Yeah, I'm going to take
That's
it
kind of
as that.
that's
Yeah.
kind of like my takeaway from this.
Yeah.
If you're here, Nathan, and you want to clarify for us, feel free, but that's what I'm going to answer for now. Um, that is basically like asking me what is my licensure cover, I think.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
what do I feel like is appropriate for me to answer is a lot of like what did I go to school for to answer?
Right,
Like
right. And so
you want to
what
come
did
to me.
you let's back up. So what did you go to school
So
for?
I went to school. I have a degree in psychology, and I have a license. I have further education that gives me a license in addictions counseling. I'm a substance abuse counselor.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I would say that if somebody came to me and is like, hey, am I addicted to X substance? That's within my jurisdiction to talk about.
Mhm.
And I could ask them clarifying questions if I wanted to do
Mhm.
that, to diagnose them.
Mhm.
And I could say yes or no based on what you just answered. You fall into the realm of yes, addicted, or no, not addicted. That's within my realm. I can diagnose. I don't know that I would, because I am personally a big proponent of like there should be a therapeutic relationship happening, and I'm not in a therapeutic setting,
Mhm.
and I think that's important. Like when you go to a therapist, you don't just like go and hang out with them in their house
Right, right,
and just
right,
like
right, right,
go and like get a pizza with them and chill. You're not doing that. You're going to their office and you're sitting in their office with them and they have their notepad and they're asking you very professional questions. And there is a certain relationship that is there. And like, if you're doing well as a therapist, there should be minimal like there shouldn't be too much of like an authority versus like, patient kind of feel to the conversation, but there is a certain amount of that that always will remain, because that is what keeps that person coming back to you and like seeking your professional opinion, is that like sense of authority. um so I guess like that was kind of like a really really broad way for me to say like that's the stuff that I know I can talk about within my licensure. And like obviously somebody else can't just be like, yep, you're an alcoholic, unless
Right.
they have that same kind of licensure. So I guess like, there's that. I do not personally have experience with substance abuse. I can see chat smuckers. I don't personally have experience with substance abuse. I have addiction in my family. So I have people in my family that were alcoholics that are no longer with us, but so I grew up like kind of surrounded by it, so I have like personal experience seeing it, which is why that demographic is interesting to me. But personally myself, no.
Yeah. Ella says getting pizzas with your therapist would be cool because that would make me so much more relaxed. I don't disagree. That's not the environment and like the right place for it per se, but I don't disagree. I could
I
see
well, like
myself.
I think any person, like any therapist worth their weight is trying to do everything they can to make you feel at ease.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
like, like if you feel really anxious going to your therapist, tell them that, because they may not know. They may not know that that's how you're feeling, and like all it takes is like you divulging that information for them to say like what would happen, like what would I need to do to help you feel more relaxed, like what can I do. And sometimes it's just changing their vernacular. Like I had that with a certain patients, like they felt like I was so inaccessible to them, and especially in the demographic that I was working in, a lot of times I was working with, not always, like addiction hits anybody for a fun fact, but a lot of times I was working with people that were like lower income, or maybe didn't have housing, or like maybe never had housing. So like a lot of times I was dealing with people that were like kind of street language, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they would not take me seriously if I would like ask them the diagnostic questions in like a very clinical way. If I was like, have you ever smoked cocaine?
Uh-huh.
Like they'd be
Right,
like,
right.
come on now, girl. So
Right, right,
like
right.
for some
Have you
people
ever
it's
done the
just
marijuana cigarettes?
have you ever tried? Have you ever tried maybe the black tar heroin? So like I think some of that is like you can ask that of your therapist too, like,
Right,
or you can try to seek a therapist that does make you feel at ease, that kind of stuff. So
right, right, right. Oh my gosh. Valtheria asks, "What can you tell? What can you tell a loved one who recently got a diagnosis of bipolar 2, but absolutely refuses to believe the psychiatrist, even though he knows that they've experienced this behavior for years? How do you not come off as rude?"
so basically somebody says like, hey, the person diagnosed me and I don't believe it.
Yeah, but like
Be
it's
like,
I
but
guess
you
but it's clear to
know
everybody that the diagnosis doesn't seem so far off.
I think I would start by asking them why they don't believe it,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know because like you're not going to get anywhere by just telling them no, but it's true, or like seek a second opinion, or like, if you ask them why they don't believe it, you might get to the heart of like that like pushback that they're feeling on it
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
really easily. Because my chances are they're just having a hard time coming to terms with bipolar is a big disorder. Like that's
Yeah.
when you hear you are bipolar, you
Yeah.
grew up thinking bipolar is like the craziest of it, which is not, but like
Right.
that's what you grow up thinking. Like it
Right.
has it has a big stigma.
Yeah.
That's like saying like, hey friend, you're diagnosed schizophrenic. Like you hear that
Yeah.
and you're like, oh god damn,
Yeah.
like
Like life is over kind of thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very possible that they're just having a hard time like coping with the fact that they might be bipolar.
Right.
And if
Right.
they probably know it here, but like they're just having a hard time with that diagnosis. Would that not knowing the situation, like that'd be my reaction if somebody was like, hey, you're bipolar. I'd be like, no, no, I'm not.
Right.
No, I'm not. Nope,
Right.
nope, 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 nope. Because it's
Right.
hard. It's hard. Like even when I was diagnosed with anxiety, I was kind of like, I don't think like I remember the first time I ever was diagnosed with a mental health disorder. I was depressed, I don't have depression, but I was depressed, and I was diagnosed with that kind of short-term depression. And I remember I resisted. I resisted because I was younger, but I was like, I'm no. Depressed people are this. I am not
Yes.
depressed.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I've literally heard somebody say, "Well, I'm not that kind of blank
Mm-hmm.
though." And
Yeah.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
but
Because
I was there too. I remember that was my reaction. I was like, "No, but I'm not really sad." And they're like, "Well, that's not what that is. That's not what that is."
it takes us talking about it and us being advocates before people understand that there are so many different ways that this manifests,
Yeah.
and the media portrayals are only some of those.
Oh my gosh. But
You know?
but that's exactly it, is that I think that's why mental health advocacy, like that in a nutshell, is the reason why it's so important, is so
Mhm.
that people could see you and you talk about anxiety and then be like, that's what anxiety looks like. Okay, I have a
Maybe what
loved
I'm
one. Mhm.
maybe what I'm experiencing, maybe that person. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um,
That's what it's for, because if you don't talk about, I mean, it's, I think it's the same thing, like people talked about it when being gay was slowly becoming more acceptable. There are people that are like, "Oh, I've been questioning my sexuality this whole time.
yeah,
Maybe, oh, that is normal. That is okay that I was doing that. Oh, there's an answer to why I was doing that." It's, yeah, it's being able to feel okay about whatever it is that's going on with you, and then potentially get that. For some people, getting diagnosed is extremely freeing,
yeah,
because
for
you,
some people,
yeah,
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 because it's like all of a sudden you have a name and a path
yes, yes,
to deal. Yeah, for some people it's just like that, but then there's like I said, there's that pushback, and like I don't know. I don't know this person. I don't know the situation, but that would be my first question to that person would be, why don't you think you might be bipolar?
yeah,
Like, why are you questioning the professional's opinion?
right.
What
I
exactly is going on here?
I mean, I think, and I think Frank is way more qualified to answer that question. But I think I would also, if I was in that scenario, I would also ask them, like, can I help you get a second opinion? Would it make you truly feel better if you had somebody else tell you the same thing, or is this about what you actually heard? Kind of
Yeah,
trying to get down to the bottom of, is it the word that they heard, or is it, or is it just the fact that they were,
I think
yeah,
yeah, I think the important part that we're both kind of reiterating here, and that was part of the question that we're both kind of skirting around, is neither one of us is telling you to continue to tell that person that they're bipolar or try to
right,
get them to believe it,
right, yeah,
because
that's not gonna
your
work.
opinion unfortunately does not matter,
Yeah,
because until they find a diagnosis that works, or they accept that diagnosis, they're not going to get treatment for it, and nothing you
that's the
say
bottom line. That's
is
very
going to
true.
push them into accepting that diagnosis.
Yeah,
um, you have to kind of meet them with empathy and say, like, always meet people with empathy, and always say, like, okay, so I hear you pushing back on this diagnosis, but I want to know why. Like, this professional told you, and I accept that you don't believe this professional, but why don't you believe this professional? Like,
right.
what of your experiences tell you something else?
Right.
You know?
And that goes for anything. If you suspect somebody's depressed, if somebody's anxious, if somebody is bulimic, whatever it is, you
Yep.
absolutely telling them, "Hey, you're bulimic," is not going
Yep.
to make them not have that eating disorder anymore.
Yep.
And like, it's not, but coming, like, helping them come to a place of acceptance will.
That's a huge thing in addictions. Like, people will always say, like, but that person's an alcoholic and they need help,
Yes.
and you hear it all the time, like,
Sure.
until that person wants help, there's no help to be given.
Right.
And it's so true. Like, we had people that were in for they were like held, like, by the state,
Mhm.
basically,
Mhm.
like they
Mhm.
were there because they medically were told they had to be there, and we had to basically hold them against their will into this treatment
Mhm.
facility. And I guarantee you that they just left and drank. It
Right.
doesn't matter how long you keep that person there and how much therapy they go through. If they're doing it because if they're doing it because they're told they have to,
Yeah.
or they're doing it against their will, then they're not doing it. It's not
Hell,
real.
yeah. I've seen people who have said, "Okay, I'm ready to get help. I'm admitting that something's wrong," and then they
Yeah.
still relapse
Oh
into their
yeah, yeah,
previous
yeah.
actions because they were like not really ready, or
Yeah, they were like ready for the first step, but then like they didn't know how much work it was going to be. And it's
right,
hard.
right,
It's hard.
right. All
Mental
of
health
it's
is
hard.
not different. It's hard. You're
Right.
facing it's the bravest thing you're ever going to do to get help for something that's going on in your life,
Yeah.
because you are just taking that thing and you are meeting it head on,
Yep.
and it's hard.
Acknowledging it, and yeah.
It's hard to say like, this is why I feel this way.
Yep.
This is what causes me to feel this way, and this is what I do when I feel this way. Like all of that feels bad.
Yeah.
So we don't want to deal with it. We just want to pretend it's not happening.
Yep.
So yeah, go get yourself in therapy and know that we're all here supporting you doing it, because you know, if you feel like you need therapy.
Get
I
therapy.
honestly, like I'm not against anybody just like going to meet a therapist just to like talk even.
Yeah.
Even if you
No,
need
that's
it.
what I say. I was like, you don't have to have anything going on to talk to a therapist. You could just be like, hey, there's this thing that I do. I don't know if it's weird or not. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
anything. Hey, my significant other and I argue a lot, and I would like somebody else's perspective on these things that we argue
Like,
about.
is it normal that we argue? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we argue a normal amount,
Yeah.
or is something else going on?
Yeah. Do you and I don't mean this because what I remember hearing in college, there was this one guy that got up when they were asked, they're like, is it okay for somebody to seek therapy, and why or why not? And this one guy got up and he said, I don't believe it's okay because it just means that person doesn't have friends. And I was like, what kind of wise friends do you have that
Yeah,
you could
right?
that like you could just trust your friends head on with any opinion that they have? Like, wow. Wow. Okay.
No. Yeah, no, I do not have that friend. I would like to have that friend. That would be really nice.
That would be so convenient. Yeah. But Whitey Gamer, if it's a question, you gotta type in exclamation Q. Otherwise, we're not gonna be able to see it in the queue, and it's gonna get lost and swept up in the chat roulette. Okay, DJ Vinylwood says, I assume you've seen a lot. What is something surprising you've noticed about yourself from your work?
I guess like the most surprising thing for me is my constant inability to overlook my things that I like overlook, if that makes sense. I have blind spots.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all have blind spots,
Mm-hmm.
but I have blind spots, and it always took me by surprise. It took me years of practicing before I finally started to like even recognize that it was a blind spot. And then I was like, this is something that I should be aware of, and I need to work on this, even if it's something that like I don't personally agree with, but like it makes me a bad therapist, basically. It makes me a bad counselor. To have those blind spots. But like religion for me is a huge blind spot. I'm not a religious person, never have been a religious person really. Grew up religious, but I denounced it a long time ago. And so for me, that's never been a coping mechanism.
Yes, same.
And it is for a lot of people.
Right. And you have to be able to meet them halfway with that. You can't be
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's bullshit.
Yeah, that's BS, because like it works for some people to
Right.
pray about it and to go to church and to like,
Right.
be in that. And then like every time somebody would bring it up, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's a good, go ahead, do that thing. Like that's a healthy coping mechanism. Congratulations, you're doing that. So I think that was like probably, that's like one of the biggest surprises about myself, is like the constant need to like introspect and really focus on like where I can be improving.
I actually really admire your self-awareness, just like overall. Like that's the feed every time I come into your streams, every time we have an interview, the thing that I take away is always like, wow, this person has like this amazing heightened self-awareness that helps them help themselves. As much as you do, and that's incredible. I mean, I'm sure you go through hard times, and I'm not saying you have it all figured out or anything, but I am saying
that
like
help, but it does help. Like
sometimes it hurts. I know, like sometimes being very aware of yourself, you're like, I just want to shut this off because I don't want to think about me for a moment. Like I get that.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's interesting because like when I'm really anxious, I know that I'm not fun to be around when I'm like that, because like nothing you say is gonna help.
Yeah,
I'm just like in my head, and I just need to kind of like live with it for a little while. And I know it'll like, the worst part of it will pass, and I'll be able to like bring logic back into it eventually. But in those moments, there is no logic. And anything you say, I will logic against you. Like I will be able to give you a counter argument in those moments. Right?
Yeah. And that's why I tell people, like, don't sit there and argue with somebody who's dealing with depression or anxiety, because people will come to me and they'll be like, and then they said this, and then I said that, and I always say, like, well, did you enjoy arguing with their mental illness? Because that's what you did.
They're not dumb. They're clever people, and they like
that's part of the reason. If it was totally logical, and if you could just figure it out and your brain didn't convince you that was the logical solution, like, nobody would have this.
Yeah, exactly. So like I tell people when I'm like that, I'm like, don't be around me because I'm just going to bring your mood down. But I also don't want to be alone.
Yes.
So like I will, like, my partner, a lot of times I'll, like, it's like, you know, like if we have plans or something and he's like, do you want me to go anyway? Do you want to come with? And I'm like, there's no way I'm going. And he'll say, like, do you want me to stay home? And I always say no. But I always tell him, expected text from me at some point tonight telling you that I'm sad that you went. Mm-hmm. Because I know. Yeah. I know that I don't want him to not go, because that is
selfish and not
ruining his night, right? And for what? For him to sit at home, for me to be not fun company and like ruin the plans that he had. Right. But at the same time, like when he leaves, I'm always like, I wish he wouldn't have.
Right. Oh my
But like, I don't actually want him to go. Like,
but girl, mood though.
Mood. Like, I don't want him. It's the whole thing. So like, I always tell him, and like, I'm self-aware, and I know that that's how I'm gonna feel, and so he knows that's how I'm gonna feel. But I always like, I still feel bad when I like guilt him, and I'm like, I wish you hadn't have gone. Like, I don't know. It's kind of nice because at least I know why I feel the ways I do, but it doesn't actually help me not feel the way I do.
No, I get it. I get it though. I get it though. I do, because I'm an extroverted person, so, and I've been abandoned several times in my life, like actually like by parents. And so anytime like if I don't feel well and then somebody leaves, my first my first reaction is to go back to that moment and be like, oh, they're never coming back, and they don't want to deal with me, and they don't, like, it's going back to that abandonment mindset of like, well, they don't want to be here, and so I've just pushed them away, right, and stuff like that. So I get it. Like, it must be something that I did, and therefore they're not coming back, when the reality of it was you had a conversation and you agreed to them to leave for like 2 hours and then come back. Like,
but like, your brain doesn't work like that. I don't know. Not always. There's like unfortunate non-logic.
No, you have flawed logic that protects you to continue thinking the way you do. Exactly. Do you still have a few more minutes? Because I'm gonna close the queue, everybody. I'm really sorry, but I'm gonna close the queue because Frank does eventually have to go, and your questions have been amazing and super in depth. So I want to make sure that we give the next 4 questions our best attention, and then I'm gonna stick around. And Frank, we're gonna let Frank go, but I'm gonna be here, and so we can continue talking. But I want to close the queue for now. I have an issue with someone who currently completely refuses any suggestion for help and accuses me of blaming them and ridiculing them when I'm sharing my experiences with therapy. And I can't, it cuts off your question after a while, Sunflower Geek, and I'm really sorry about that. But, and it's helped me. What would you do? So they're refusing for help and accusing me of ridiculing them when I share my experiences with therapy. So what would you do?
Oh,
yeah, it's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
But it comes up for me a lot. Or it's come up for me way more times in my life than I would have liked to.
So it sounds like they feel like you, when you're talking about your therapy experiences, they feel like you're telling them to go get therapy. I'm not saying that that's what you're doing, but it sounds like that's what they feel like you're doing. And so I would analyze your language when you do talk about therapy and make sure that you are talking about your experiences and how helpful it is to you. And then, make sure that you're taking all of that off of you.
There's definitely a backhanded way to be like, therapy sure is great. You should go for it, right? Like, there's definitely a way to...
It's been really helping me. And I think that sometimes advocacy is just saying, like, I went to therapy again today and it was again helpful for me. And just leaving it at that and not even saying, like, you should go do that, right? and just saying like therapy's been really good for me. It's helped me in these ways. And maybe it's helped you in similar ways to things that you recognize they need help in. So for example, like, I go to therapy and it helped me deal with my anxiety when I felt this very particular thing that was going on. Like I felt the onset of a panic attack, and I was able to kind of handle that because of this experience that I had in therapy. And maybe that friend has also been dealing with panic attacks. So now you've said, without telling them go get therapy, it helps with panic attacks. You could be helped with your panic attacks. You've said my therapy has helped me with my panic attacks. And just that's it. That's absolutely it. Nothing more. And unless they ask more about it, like tell me more about your therapy experiences, that kind of thing. They're reaching out for help and are suicidal. They believe therapy is useless and psychiatry is a money-making venture.
Yeah, that's an important addition because that does change things a little bit, I think.
When they're suicidal, I would definitely, you can reach out for them to a crisis line, especially if you know where they live. And if you don't, find out if they're continuously reaching out to you for being suicidal. Just say like, hey, if I'm going to be your crisis line, if I'm going to be your person that you come to, I need this information from you. And if they are not willing to provide that, the harsh reality of this is you are not their therapist and you are not a crisis worker.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, you cannot be responsible
out of your life.
Yeah.
Like that's the harsh reality is you might need to cut this person, at least in that way, out of your life. If, because it's not good for you.
No.
Right? It's not good for you to continuously not be able to help them.
Well, I think, and I would ask them, and I have before, like, what can I help with you today?
Yeah,
how can I help you? What can I do? Because that usually somebody who's just constantly coming and taking and taking and taking from you will usually get stumped by that question because they don't know. They don't know.
They don't actually know what they want.
No. Yeah. They're just there because they need something. That is the time for a therapist to step in because the therapist usually will know how to respond to them and how to bring them into a comfortable environment. But if they're just, you can't bro, you can't have it both ways. You can't be like, everything sucks and I need help, but not that help because I don't want to pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, what? I think you have a really nice point there. Like, they need the help that they're not willing to get, right? They're not willing to. Not that they shouldn't get it and they're not able to. They're not willing to get that help. And I think
they're clearly asking for help. They've requested it from you several times.
Requesting it from you because they're comfortable with you. And so I think you say what do you need from me? What can I do? What can I be helpful with? And if they say, I don't know, then say come back to me when you do.
Yeah. But that's what they're saying. I did that and they just said, I don't know. He wants to talk and ask. But I think that that's your boundary. You can draw a line and say, I've done everything I can. This is what you need to do for your next steps. You're asking me, what should you do for your next steps? These are the steps. If you don't want them, this is it. This is as much as I can give.
Yeah.
That's okay.
It's okay it hurts. And I know it doesn't feel good to cut somebody out of your life, but if they're not willing to talk about the kinds of help that might help them, and you're not willing to even entertain it. So there is a way for you to be like, okay, so if you don't want to go to therapy, why? And they say it's a scam. It's a scam. It's a money-making scam. Why is it a money-making scam to you? You feel like that the medication doesn't help? Do you need more proof that the medication might help? Would that help you? If I provide you research on how medication does help, do you think that might change your opinion? Or have you tried talking to a therapist and it didn't work? Why didn't it work? What about that therapist didn't you like? I think you can get specific about why they feel like that. They're giving you the broad reason why it doesn't work for them. Therapist is stupid. I don't want that kind of help. It doesn't work anyway. Psychiatry is a scam, right? Medication is a scam. So you can either dig deeper if you're willing to put the energy into it.
Well, it sounds like they already have. That's the only thing.
Yeah, that's the big part of this is if you haven't done those things and you are willing to put energy into those things, because it's okay to say I can't. This is too much energy for me. It's okay to cut that piece of your friendship out of your life. We have a lot of different kinds of friends in our lives. We have friends that we go to when times are really tough and we need to talk it out. And, those are the friends that are tried and true friends. And then we have friends that we wouldn't go to for those things, but we go to for other things that are going on in our lives. And we have friends that we don't go to for any of those tough situations. And they're just like our fluff friends. And like, those are still our friends. It doesn't make their friendship less valuable. It's just different. That's okay too. Like, it's okay to say, like, I need to take a step back from this friendship because this isn't good for me anymore.
Yeah.
And it sucks and it hurts. And I'm not going to say it's an easy step and an easy decision to make, but honestly, if you feel like you've done everything you can and they're still not willing to get help, that's not on you.
Yep. Yeah.
Honestly, I would suggest looking into Al-Anon if you're having a really, really hard time with the stepping away part of it. I know that's technically for addictions, but it's for like family members that of addicts, and kind of how they cope with the fact that there is an addict in their life.
Yeah.
And it's obviously a little bit different, but it's a lot of it is applicable to when you have somebody in your life that has mental health issues that are just taxing and weighing, and you have to say, like, I can't do this anymore because it's enabling.
Yeah. Right. That was the word that I was looking for. At some point you're enabling them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I hope that helps, Sunflower.
I know that's hard, Sunflower. I'm sorry.
It's so you're in a tough spot. But Sunflower Geek is a very wonderful mental health advocate, so I wanted to make sure that we address that question for sure. And I feel like a lot of people go through that. I don't know many people who have a comfortable time setting that boundary. I don't know many therapists who have a comfortable time setting that boundary.
It sucks. Yeah. It really sucks. But when a person is just unwilling to get help, you have to stop trying.
Yep. Yeah. Bad Nerd Cooking. How do you suggest dealing with the balance of supporting someone struggling but not being hurt by their struggles? So I think that's kind of a similar question.
Similar thing, yeah. It's a lot. It's knowing where your boundaries are. And I think it's really okay to recognize that they might need more from you than you are able to give.
Yeah.
And it's possible to keep them in your life and keep them even in that capacity in your life. I want to kind of like expound on this, because if you're not at a breaking point with that person and you're not like, I can never handle this,
right?
Like sometimes maybe you can, but sometimes it sucks, and there are certain days that you are okay with it and other days that you're not. I think it's okay to set a boundary as well. Like, you can set the hard boundary of, we can't talk about this anymore because it always hurts me. But if it's not always, and it's just like, if you're going through your own stuff that day, you can't handle it that day, it's okay to like talk to that person and say, like, hey, when you come to me, can you just ask how I'm feeling that day? If I'm open to receiving that before we talk about it. And, like, maybe if I'm not available, somebody else will be available for you.
Yeah.
But like, I need to know, like, I need to have that like preparedness. That's something that I do with a lot of my friends. I'll say, like, are you available both mentally and physically? Like, because it's important that they are mentally available to me just as much as their time is available to me, because a lot of times I think we get in the habit of saying, like, hey, can I talk to you? And we're just like, yeah, whatever. But like, yeah, I'm free for a minute. Why not? But, really, like, we're not mentally available at all.
Well, and that goes back to boundary setting, I think. And that a lot of things go back to that is being able to say, having the self-awareness to be like, I can't help you at this time, and that's okay. That doesn't mean I'm a bad friend, a bad person, whatever it is. Right. It just means that I am not capable of helping you in this moment. I will try to get you other resources that maybe even can, but I cannot right now, and that's okay.
Yeah. It's really okay. It's okay to set boundaries. Do it. Healthy. Or don't do it. Whatever works for you.
Twisty Chris, I've also, and I talk about this, that like, I've been that friend that dumps everything and that feels suicidal and extremely depressed, and then you dump that onto your other friends, and then you get upset that they are not handling your situation for you. And
I've lost friends that way.
Yeah. And
lost friends from dumping on them and them saying, I can't deal with this, and we just, we don't talk anymore. And in the end, I look back and I'm like, damn, that was my fault.
Yeah, same. Definitely have those times. Like, I even look back at high school, because I had a miserable time. I was abused at home, and so people then I was always, any friend that I would get in high school, I would like dump all this emotional stuff on them. So like 15, 16-year-olds are not prepared for that. So like now I look back at that and I'm like, oh my God, those poor kids did not see this coming. And here I was, you know, and I can't blame them for not knowing what to do.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. That was a lot of my experience as well. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, but
okay.
We're groaning. We're better persons for it now.
Yeah, exactly.
Whitey Gamer asks, are either of you familiar with the essay about $1 Million Murray? It was about a homeless alcoholic in and out of hospitalization for 20 plus years, I think, and it was more about advocacy for support services and housing the homeless. But I think it's relevant to the you can only help those who are willing to accept help argument. I don't know about that essay, but that does sound very interesting.
I don't think I know that essay, but there was a documentary done about somebody very similar. I don't think it was $1 Million Murray. I don't remember the person's name, but there was a documentary that was done about somebody that was in and out of jail, because that's currently our addiction.
That's our solution right now.
Yeah, is to put them in jail. So it was basically the same idea. It was like an advocacy for treatment and more treatment centers and things like that. I'm sure that's a great essay, but yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah, no, it's a real issue, and one that Lucid Fox will talk about on his stream. We've thrown out his name a lot this episode. I don't know why it is.
Yeah, Lucid's great. Great, and does have a history of addiction. Not to out him, he's outed himself.
No, he on the stream, so we're
Oh, is he gonna be on this week?
No, but he's been on the stream and talked about his addiction before. Yeah.
He's a good bean.
Yeah. Super Gaijin asks, how do you feel about individuals who claim they have insert long list of issues but never been medically diagnosed?
I think there's something to be said for being self-aware and knowing how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
But I do also feel like, so we have to understand that their claims are coming from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that those claims are necessarily accurate, because obviously they have not been diagnosed, and diagnoses are always in flux, and it takes time to come to and they change, and like there's lots of problems with diagnoses, because it's not as simple and straightforward as, like, I don't know. Even in medical diagnoses, though, that's the thing, is like, even in medical diagnoses, like, there's not something that's similar, like super simple and straightforward all the time. Like, sometimes
a lot of them are similar and close to each other, and diagnosis is not like, I think a lot of people think that like a diagnosis is like a Bible, or like a writing in cement or something, but a diagnosis is more like, here is what we can use. Here's what other doctors have done in similar situations that we can try to use to help you.
Yes.
That's really it.
The thing that I would be leery of is a lay person diagnosing themselves with a laundry list of things, especially if some of those are very severe things, because if you've ever taken an abnormal psych class, it's a very fascinating class, but I swear you come away with a laundry list of things that you do not have. I came away from my abnormal psych class, and I was like, I think I might be bipolar.
Yeah.
I think I might have OCD.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that I'm schizophrenic.
Yeah.
Like, every single time we did any diagnoses, I was like, oh my God, I have all of those symptoms. You have none of those symptoms, Frank. None of those symptoms. Absolutely not. Some of your experiences were heightened because you were comparing them, trying to like understand what was going on here. But like, that's kind of what happens. People might read the list of symptoms on WebMD and they say like, oh yeah, that all fits. That totally fits, in the same way that my horoscope fits every time I read it. You know,
right. Well,
obviously it's a little different. I'm not
no,
saying,
but it is. And it's the same reason I tell people there's a reason that every diagnosis on WebMD ends up, and it can be cancer. Because the point is that it can literally be anything. All the diagnoses that, like, even that WebMD gives you, and full disclosure, I work for WebMD. I'm not defending them. I'm defending the concept. Yeah. Like, the reason, the full reason why it works is to help you just narrow down possibilities for yourself. Not so you go into the doctor's office and go, like, I know for yes. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine. No, because you nailed it. It's not so you go into the doctor's office and go, I know I have scurvy. It's so that you go into the doctor's office and go, here's a list of things that's going on that I think might be important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't use it that way, but yeah, that's exactly what it should be for.
Yeah.
It's for you to like triage yourself, or even to say like, I have this list of symptoms. Is it important enough to go get checked out?
Yep. There you
You
go.
know,
Right.
like
Right. Right.
maybe
Right.
this is nothing. Oh, it turns out it's probably nothing.
Right.
Or I should wait to see if this one thing gets worse before I decide if it's
Right.
anything.
Right.
You know, like that's how we should be using it, but unfortunately we don't. And I think a lot of times when people diagnose themselves with mental health disorders, it's a similar thing where they're saying like, these are symptoms that I'm experiencing, and I've read that it could be this laundry list of things. And I think it's okay to like understand that those symptoms, at least to that person, are real.
Right.
But I think it's also important to recommend and say like, just like take it with a grain of salt. It's frustrating, but I think this comes back to like meet them with empathy,
Yeah.
because to them it is real.
Yeah, well, because something is going on. Well, like,
Yeah.
why? And it goes back to the question why, right? Why did I not want to go to a doctor, but I am so convinced that I am depressed,
Yes.
or that I have OCD? Like,
Yeah.
what is that's not a healthy person's lookout onto life, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
something must be going on that this person is like, I'm not well. I have to figure out why, but I'm too scared to go to a doctor about it. Like, there has to be some empathy to meet that with there. But if they
Yeah.
start,
Sure.
you know, if it's frustrating if that person starts like living their life according to this diagnosis that they never received, but that's still not for you to decide. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't have to hang out with them. You don't have to be friends with, like, absolutely. I'm not saying you're forced to, but I am saying
Yeah.
have a little bit of empathy to their situation, and at least put yourself in their shoes enough to be like, oh, something's not right, and
Yeah.
I might not agree with it, but that doesn't mean that like they're doing the wrong thing and I'm doing the, like, you know.
Yeah. Honestly, like, yeah, you can kind of like very quietly remove yourself from that stuff and vent to people who don't know that person about how it frustrates you that they talk about these mental health disorders that maybe you take very seriously because you
Right.
have them, and it's frustrating to see somebody just like
Throw them
willy-nilly
out there.
yeah.
Yeah.
But like it's okay to like have those feelings too. I'm not saying like you can't have those feelings. You can't be frustrated by it, because it can be frustrating. But just like, to that person, a lot of that stuff is real.
Yeah.
And or it's them seeking attention, which is a whole other form of
Still a
grief.
problematic behavior, and I say
Yeah,
this
it's
a lot too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like even if they're like, I'm diagnosing myself with all of these things, like that might be borderline personality disorder, maybe, but
Yeah.
like that's still
Heck,
something
that could
you
be
can talk
Munchausen
about.
syndrome. Like, yeah. Or it could be just hypochondria, like whatever
Yeah,
it is. Yeah.
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 It's still like a thing, that we should be aware of, and kind of, I think you kind of treat it at face value then.
Yeah. There are occasionally times when the patient is actually right, though, if they had done in research and their doctors invalidate them due to pride. I mean, sure, Tally,
You are
but
you are your own best advocate, and I
sure.
do agree with that. I have a hard time. This is a hard line for me because my mom's a doctor, so I've seen her be belittled by a patient who thinks they know better
Uh huh.
because they did do a WebMD
Uh
diagnosis, and she's
huh.
like, "Yeah, where's your med degree?"
Yeah.
Um, I mean, this happened to me literally today with my mom, where I was like, I called my mom on stream because I've been dealing with this sinus issue that I told you about before the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, my eye is watering and it feels like I'm constantly about to sneeze. And I was telling chat this morning, and they're like, "Oh, you have allergies." And I'm like, "No, I don't have allergies. I've never had allergies before. So I don't have allergies. Like, this isn't allergies. I'm pretty sure a bug flew up my nose or something. Something's just irritating my sinus. I don't
Yeah.
know what it
Yeah.
is."
Yeah.
But I tried to flush it out and it didn't work, and it's still kind of like that. And they're like, "Yeah, because you have allergies." And I was like, "I'm going to call my mom right now, my doctor mom, and I'm going to ask her about all of this." And she was like, "Yeah, it sounds like you have allergies." And I was like, "Right, but maybe a bug flew up my nose." Did maybe a bug flew up my nose and I don't have allergies? And she was like, "Unlikely, especially if you tried to flush it out." But like, that's me advocating for myself. This is obviously like a really silly example of this, but this is me advocating for myself and saying,
Right.
I don't think it is allergies because I've never had them before. It doesn't feel like allergies,
Right.
and for these reasons, it feels like it could have been this thing, and
Right.
this is my evidence backing this up.
Right.
But then when she said like, "Okay, but try this thing and it's not going to hurt to try that thing, and if it is allergies, your symptoms will be alleviated, and if it's not, that's okay too." Like, then we'll figure out what is going on.
Mm-hmm.
But like most cases, like the one extra step like is not gonna hurt you.
Yeah.
Most I think it's important to like self-advocate. I think it is important to be aware of what could be going on, but at the same time, like that medical professional, they know what is most common.
Right. If they're arguing with you, there's probably a reason. And Tally Twitch, I have to add here, and I understand where the jadedness comes from because we've had other discussions about it, but and I just take issue personally when people say, "What about this one outlying experience?" Like, absolutely, like, but that's not the norm.
Yeah. Right. It like you say yourself, it is a rarity.
Right.
You know, like it is a rarity that kind of thing happens. And unfortunately, everybody feels like they're the special rarity. Right. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, and clearly it happened to you.
But no, case in point, you just thought you were like, I can't have allergies because I am not a person that has allergies. And you like are like dead set on this.
Yeah, I don't have allergies. Yeah. I'm not totally convinced I have allergies.
Yeah.
I haven't taken the medication yet because the only one I have is Benadryl in it, and I was like, I don't want to fall asleep on Marie.
Right.
I'll let you know.
I'm so sorry, you poor thing.
No, I'm actually feeling okay right now.
Oh my gosh, I'm making you suffer through.
No, you're totally fine. Honestly, like I'll tell you tomorrow whether or not I have allergies. The world will know.
The world will know.
Shouted from the rooftop. Yeah. It was pretty funny. She shut me down for real hard today.
Yeah, like on stream. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I called her and I was like, I'm gonna call you on stream because they're arguing with me right now. And she was like, yeah, go for it. I put her on speakerphone and I was like, so they think I have allergies. And she's like, yeah, it sounds like you do. That's what I was gonna say. And I was like, but maybe I have a bug up my nose. And she was like, no, probably not.
Probably not. But you're advocating for yourself. There is a chance. Is there a chance? There is a chance of that. And could that be that like your mom would be like, yo, there's a bug up your nose. I see it now. You are actually right. But does that mean your mom is like not right to assume first that it's the thing that's most common? No. Of course.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
It's hard when we go to doctors, especially like it's different for me because it's my mom and like I'm used to doctors and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But it's hard when we go to doctors and we kind of like a lot of people don't feel like they can stand up to their doctor, so they don't say anything.
Yeah,
and they don't say like, "Are you sure it's not this?" Or
no, I dealt with that where a doctor had prescribed me a medication and I was like, I know that doesn't make any sense to my diagnosis. Like I went back and I went and gotten a second opinion and the other doctor was like, you should have never, like that medication is for this condition. I don't know how the heck they prescribed that to you. And then I went back to the original doctor and they said it was an accident.
See? Like, well, they're human. They're human people too.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I think a lot of people won't ask doctors to explain where they're coming to their conclusions, and unfortunately a lot of doctors don't necessarily want to give that explanation. You know, they don't want to take the time to do those things, and it's frustrating, but
yeah, all of the above. Just quickly, Ella asks, any idea how to deal with healthcare professionals who are suffering from mental health issues but don't seek help because it would never happen to me? That's a personal issue, man. It's the same thing over and over again. Is that they have to come to that conclusion themselves. I mean, I wouldn't go to that. I mean, it's not up to you to tell them. You know?
Yeah, I mean, especially if you are going to them and they are your provider. If they're making you feel uncomfortable because they have some clear mental health issues present, find a new one.
Yeah.
Get out of there. Get out of there because that's not helping you. If they're making you uncomfortable or you feel like that's hindering your therapy with them, like that's not good.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you're the patient and you're in charge of that. Yeah. All right, Frank, we've taken enough of your time, my lord.
I adore you so very much. Thank you for.
Oh my goodness.
For me, before this was like, I'm only going to keep you to 2 hours. And I was like, fat chance.
Is that why you laughed? Because I was like, oh.
Okay. I laughed because I know how much I talk and I know like how much we talk when we get together. So I was like, that's not
I absolutely adore you, Frank. Like to the end of the world and back. And I love everything you do and I appreciate you so much. And thank you for doing what you do and the way you do it and bringing your little light to Twitch the way you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being the light.
Ooh, shucks. Oh, shucks, she said it, guys. She said that be the light. Be the light. Oh, yeah, she said it. All right, I'm going to be right back, you guys. I promise. I'm going to be right back for another little while, so stick around. Thank you so much, Frank, for being on.
Thank you for having me. Thank you guys for hanging out and sticking with us this whole time.
You guys are amazing. I appreciate you all so much. I'll see you in a few minutes. Everybody say bye, Frank.
Bye.